Welcome into Transfer Portal Palooza, presented by the Ultimate College Football Show. We are so excited to be with you for the next few hours, bringing you all the latest news. We have two guys who have spent a lot of time in Power 4 front offices, Cooper Patagna, Smoke Dixon. I am Emily Proud, and man, people like to talk down on this spring portal window and say that there's not a lot of action, not a lot of big names, but we've already seen a lot happen. What do we anticipate is next?
Opportunity to get better. Smoke and I were just talking about it. You know, for a lot of teams out there, I think they spend a lot of their time in the December portal window, try to address a lot of their needs. There's still teams out there with a lot of good players that we've seen enter today. Bo Atkinson, guys like that, the tackle out of South Dakota, that we'll talk about a little bit as well. So, you know, when you think about it in terms of what type of talent is in there, think about the top 400 players for us. 24 of them have entered from the spring transfer portal, right? So that's about 6%. That gives you a little bit of an idea of what type of talent is in the transfer portal in this spring window. More type of above average starter type of players with competitive depth. So teams right now, what they're trying to do, if it's a spot starter, they got to find an emergency starter, one of those guys. I think they're really just trying to address the final questions that they have before going into the summer.
You're looking at teams trying to close this playoff window. Like, how quickly can we close upon Ohio State, the national champions? And how quickly are we getting all the holes that we know now? Because we had the winter portal, the early enrollees are on campus. You've almost done with spring. So now that we have these small holes, how can we have creative depth that creates competition to make sure that we have the best team for the fall? Icing on the cake.
Yeah, we'll talk about some of those college football playoff contenders. Let's tell you what's coming up on today's show, because it is a lot. We'll tell you why Nico Iamaleava is the #1 player overall in this portal cycle. And when players enter or commit, we will bring you that breaking news live. We have our newsbreakers on standby, and then we have these guys who will react to the news. We'll also roll through, again, some of those college football playoff contenders with the biggest needs and how they can fill them during this window. And then we're going to have a little fun. Call Your Shot Portal Edition. Make sure that you know all the major moves that happened during this portal season. So I said at the beginning that we're lucky enough to have two guys who have a lot of experience in Power 4 front offices and know what this day is like. So I'll start with our former GM here. What's the strategy? What is a day like today like in the front office?
It's a bunch of phone calls and meetings that aren't necessary, but you got to have them. But this is the day that I took both of my boards, my actual boards of all the guys that we know that was already in the portal, but my anticipation board, Coop, a.k.a. the ones that we all know that we're trying to poach. And now I can put them all together, because today is the day that we find out that everyone that I anticipated along with the actual board, and put all those together and stack my board properly. So now we can start setting visits and how we're going to attack the holes that we know now that we have on our football team.
It's where preparation meets execution. You know, what's funny, I think a lot of people say, what's signing day like? What's a transfer portal like? Really, by that time, the hay's in the barn, right? You have to be proactive. If you're reacting to what you see in the market the day that it comes out, then you're already behind the sticks there, right? So I think it's all about being proactive. These personnel departments around the country that have been invested in at a really high dollar amount, you're getting to see them really kind of go through the stress test of the ever-changing landscape of college football. So a lot of these teams in good position know what they need to attack and reacting maybe to some surprising news as it comes through.
I love an anticipation board. You said it. You said that's a nice way of saying the guys that we're trying to poach. So in anticipation of some players entering the portal, you got to stay ready no matter what, right?
So you don't have to get ready.
So you don't have to get ready. We love it. The spring transfer portal window will be open for the next 10 days, so we'll continue to bring you all the breaking news. By the way, we are on the road to 1 billion views here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. If you are listening to the sound of my voice, that means you are a part of that. So thank you, but please go tell your friends, because we are so close to hitting that. And in honor of our pursuit, we are holding a giveaway. We're giving out yearly VIP subscriptions. So this is what you have to do to enter. You have to do all three of these things, so listen up. Take a photo of you watching 24/7 Sports on YouTube, which you're doing it right now. Go ahead, take your selfie. Then you share it using the hashtag Road to 1 billion. That is how you enter for the giveaway. Let's remind you of the team rankings so far in this 2025 transfer portal cycle. Texas Tech still at the top there. LSU with a very impressive class at #2. You've got Ole Miss, Oregon, Miami rounding out that top 5. If you want to make your class better, well, let's tell you the best available players in the transfer portal. Best available and best player overall is Nico Iamaleava. We'll find out potentially where he could be headed when we bring in our newsbreakers in just a bit, but a ton of talent, maybe some guys that you haven't heard of, like Elo Meduzzi. We're going to talk about him a little bit and introduce you to a top 50 prospect. Micah Hudson, somebody who entered the portal back in December, is back available. But without further ado, we got a lot of news to break on this show, so let's bring in our newsbreakers. We have Matt Zenitz and Chris Hummer, and let's start with Nico Iamaleava. He entered the portal today officially, but Chris, there was a do not contact tag attached to that entrance. When you see that, what should we think?
Typically, it means the player knows exactly where they're going. That's usually the case. They're down to 1 or 2 schools. They don't need other schools to contact them. In Nico's case, I think that is kind of up in the air what that means. Maybe he doesn't want to be bothered by a bunch of schools, but I think Matt would kind of say the same. There's just been checking around on his status. There's been a lot more no's than maybes in terms of teams that are willing to take him and potentially would be interested. So in that case, like, maybe it's just a sign that they're further ahead than everybody thinks they are. But like, talking around the country, it doesn't really feel that way.
From my standpoint, everything still seems TBD right now. So from the beginning of this whole process, so going back to 4 days ago when everything broke down and became official with the divorce with Tennessee, that there have been a number of different schools that have been floated out there and speculated about, whether it's been USC, North Carolina, Notre Dame, Texas Tech, and go down the list. And all of those schools that I just mentioned, we're never going to be involved in this. And now all eyes are on UCLA. A lot of speculation, not only in the media, but also around the football world about UCLA as a possibility. But just doing digging on my end during the course of the last few days, including in the last 24 hours, just continue to get mixed messages. And the thing that was made clear last night is that this is not some sort of foregone conclusion as things stood then that Nico would end up at UCLA. What is clear, though, is that the market is not what probably most people would have thought it would be for Nico, considering the ability that's there. And I think it's safe to say also that the market overall is probably not what Nico and his camp expected it to be when everything broke down with Tennessee.
So we're hearing all of these schools essentially drop out of the running. Why do you think that is, Matt?
Different reasons. So there are different things that go into this without airing any individual schools exact reasoning for that. But I will say that the way that things played out with Tennessee is something that did not go unnoticed around the football world. And it does create some pause for teams, for coaches, for front office officials, just based on how everything went down, and some concerns just about dealing with some drama related to that camp. And I'm trying to think of a nice way to put it here, but that's something that factors into this. And that there are also a lot of schools that feel solid about their quarterback situations at this point. So like Notre Dame, for example, that was one where, as I said before, it was floated out in the media as one to keep an eye on for Nico. Marcus Freeman has said all along that they're planning on sticking with the guys that they have, that they were never planning on going down that road. North Carolina, they're set to land another transfer quarterback. The full expectation is that they land Gio Lopez from South Alabama. That's the transfer quarterback that they had been zeroed in on. But there are different factors, just to circle back to the beginning part of this, with what I touched on being just a small component of this, and also need to make it work from a money standpoint.
I just want to quickly emphasize, just backing up one of Matt's points here, going into the spring as a quarterback, looking for a starting job is a very tough thing in the first place. There was really only realistically one school going into the spring window looking for a high-level quarterback, and that was North Carolina. Every other Power 4 school mostly addressed their needs back in the winter. So it was already going to be tough sledding for Nico to find the right place just going into the portal. Then you add on top of it everything that occurred at Tennessee. And in some ways, like, I think a lot of schools are just cheering for Nico's camp to kind of lose in this situation. I think a lot of schools are tired of people coming back to the table over and over and over again and asking for more money. And obviously Nico's camp would disagree with that, and they've told me as much. But like, if that's the case, and like Tennessee certainly contested was, I think a lot of schools are happy to see Nico maybe not be able to find a home quickly, because it's a win for the sport in some ways, for the coaches at least, because you have a bargaining chip with your next player who comes to you asking for more money. Like, this is an example, but it doesn't always work out. If it does indeed not work out for Nico in the way that we're talking about.
Yeah, that's something that Cooper mentioned on the Monday show, is that there are coaches across the country who are maybe thanking Josh Heupel for the way that he handled this situation. So that is definitely a part of it. Speaking of Cooper, I'm going to call him out on a fun tweet that he had. I don't know, maybe fun. You guys can tell me if this is serious. Potential for a reunion between Nico Iamaleava and Tennessee to go back, maybe take a pay cut, say we're sorry. 0, is that where we're putting it, Zenitz? Okay, Chris, I'd need to ask. You can give me a verbal 0, or
I'm not going to say 0,
okay,
but I would put it a very low percentage,
very low,
given
okay,
the way those in the Tennessee building have talked about how that situation ended. And can you imagine just the message that sends the locker room when you're willing to take him back in that situation? That's tough.
Yes, okay. I just needed to throw it out there. People have talked about it.
Both sides have lost here. This puts Nico in a tough situation based on how all this played out. It puts Tennessee in a tough situation now because they lose their starting quarterback, and they downgrade in that room and are left with unknown, just depending on how things play out with the portal now, and when they're able to find somebody to add in from a competition standpoint or as a potential starter here. So in those kinds of situations, that's where you would say, like, why can't you just come together and find a way to make it work? But with everything that has happened and just how ugly and public this divorce was, I just don't see it being salvageable right now. Going back to Friday, did I still feel like there was a chance that they could salvage this and make it work, come together? I did. There were people at Tennessee that did, but ultimately, Saturday morning became clear this was not happening. I don't see Nico being back in Knoxville at any point in the near future, not only as part of the football program, but highly doubt that we'll see Nico back in Knoxville visiting or anything like that, or just around the city anytime soon.
I mean, depending on where he ends up. He could have to go back, but no, sorry, Chris, what were you saying?
No, I just wanted to point out, like, it's crazy how quickly this happened, and I know we're trying to rehash everything, but like Thursday night, this was fine. Thursday, Nico was at a meeting with his quarterback's coach at his house, taking pictures. Both sides believed this would be fine. And then Friday morning, when he didn't show up to practice, it was just the cutoff point for Tennessee, and it seems like the cutoff point for Nico. So like, even like deep into that process, like they thought it would be fine, and then it wasn't. And it's hard to, when something irrevocable like that happens, bring two sides back together.
Well, certainly. Maybe I'm just thinking sunshine and roses, and maybe we can have a reunion. But no, this was a clear-cut divorce. I want to go back to something real quick that you said, Matt, with just neither side is a winner in this situation. So that brings up the Tennessee side of things. The portal is open for business. What are we hearing on the quarterback front from the Vols?
TBD.
TBD.
So probably not the answer that you were looking for. Would love to go through a list of names for you that would make sense for Tennessee, but just don't feel like it's appropriate to do that right now. And we're also still in information gathering mode right now and trying to figure out just who is realistic for Tennessee to add at this point. What is clear, though, is that Tennessee is looking and is not just content on moving forward with the young players that they have, even though they do have reason to feel good about those guys as far as their potential for moving forward.
And I think it's important to contextualize like what Tennessee could get too. I think a lot of people just assume they're going to go out and make a splash and add a top 20 quarterback in college football, which is very possible. Like they very well could. And I think some tires are being kicked in certain directions with that. But it's also possible like Tennessee just goes and adds a veteran arm who could come in, likely start and compete with the guys already in the room. I think a factor in all this, and I know y'all have talked about this on the show before, is like Faison Brandon is coming in next year with a very high NIL salary. They have a lot of money invested in that quarterback room, even without Nico. And you can't really go add a multi-year guy who's going to cost a lot of money and really make the cap work. Like Tennessee is also working against that like hypothetical cap that exists in college football right now. So while it's possible they do just go throw a bunch of money down and add an established starter, like it's very possible that happens. It's also possible they go a more conservative route and end up with maybe a less splashy name that makes more sense for the overall roster construction. That way, some of those extra dollars that came from Nico leaving can go into filling other holes on the roster.
Yeah, Josh Heupel did say, go ahead. Yeah.
Just a quick follow-up also, would have been more realistic and easier for Tennessee to find a replacement if this was the winter cycle as opposed to the spring. So if you're a high-level quarterback, if you're any player, first of all, it's less than ideal to be making the move to a new team during the summer where you've missed half of the offseason, where you've missed spring ball. It's even more challenging for a quarterback. And as attractive of a situation as Tennessee is, including at the quarterback position, it just is a tough sell right now trying to get a high-level player to leave at this point of the year. Again, not to be repetitive, but having missed half of the offseason already, not getting there until the summer, having missed spring ball, and essentially being behind the 8 ball when you arrive into new situation.
Yeah, same way you said it was tough for a quarterback to find a spot in the spring. It's tough for a school to find a quarterback if they're looking for a starter. But as Josh Heupel said, they will be looking for a quarterback from a simply numbers perspective, only having 2 scholarship guys available. Matt, Chris, thank you both so much for being here. I'm sure we'll call you back here in just a little bit because it is a very busy day in the spring transfer portal window. Let's come back here in studio and talk about just some of the things that we heard the guys say. And I want to go back to the market for Nico, and that they both acknowledged that maybe there was a bit of a surprise that some of these schools have dried up, but also not because of all the factors that they mentioned in terms of the drama that happened at Tennessee and the fact that it's the spring portal window. So what is your evaluation of what you heard as far as the market we've seen early on in this portal window for Nico?
Well, we all have to understand that when you do not contact, it's for a reason. Mm-hmm. Like, things are going on. I don't think this young man's phone has stopped being rung. It's busy because every coach and every program coach wants that talent. It's now, what are you willing to put up with? Because comes talent, also comes tolerance. Am I going to tolerate the behavior of his camp within my building to get that? So I get that the market might be drying up, but I don't believe it's completely dry right now.
I think there's a market there. I think what we're hearing there is a continued disconnect between Nico and his representatives and what he believes his financial market is in terms of compensation versus what teams are willing to pay. Mm-hmm. And we said this on Monday when we talked about this. He's not in a very good spot from a perception standpoint. So the teams negotiating his potential deal have all the leverage. They're saying, Nico, you're asking for $4 million or $3 million, or you're even asking for what you were getting compensated at Tennessee. We're not willing to do that because there's some teams that are maybe saying, hold on, we're in a good enough spot that if you were to pass on us, we're okay going into the season with what we have. We'd love to have you, but it's going to be at a number that we're comfortable with. And I think where Nico and his family and his representatives are, they're going through that process of taking their medicine and starting to realize, like, hey, whatever we thought was out there, maybe the $3 or $4 million number, reality is maybe it's closer to what we were getting paid at Tennessee, or worst case scenario, we might have to take a pay cut to go to a less ideal situation than the one that we were in.
Coop, you're really getting negotiation 101 for what you're worth, because going in and saying or else is not negotiating. You're demanding. And you and I both know if you walk into any head coach's office, not saying that this happened, but if you do, and say, if I don't get this or else I'm out of here, the likelihood of them saying get out is very high. But now that you've been removed from that situation, you're now understanding the fair market value for your skill set and your production in the open market. And like you said, it's not probably necessarily what you think, because, again, you're not thinking about what your son is, because it's your son. If you had proper representation, you would understand the value that your son provides for any team that he goes upon.
Tennessee, Josh Heupel took all his bargaining power out when they called his bluff. And now he's on the free agency market, and some missteps along the way for how this was handled publicly only make this more difficult for them to negotiate. So this is really going to be interesting. The other part I want to say about this, we threw out the hypothetical of these two ever being able to come back together, and said it on Monday once again, like, this is the best situation for Nico Iamaleava is Tennessee. And vice versa, it's the best situation for Tennessee as well. And you wonder, okay, as time passes, as the market, you look around and there's not really a Gio Lopez out there. That would have been a nice get for Tennessee if they decided to go in that direction. There's not a lot of guys like him that are high floor players that can come in and step in and maybe win a starting job. So I don't know. I get it right now. It's very emotional and it's very raw and it's very recent. But I wonder if we're in a stalemate here over the next 2 weeks. Hey, do cooler heads prevail, and maybe there's something there between the two parties that they can figure out? Probably not, like they alluded to. But from a business standpoint, if I were advising either side, I would leave that option on the table.
Coop, I might have the answer for. I think there's a high percentage of zero that this happens, just because of how it was left.
Yeah.
And for everybody that's a Tennessee Vols fan, when we hear that, I think either Matt, I don't remember if Matt or Chris made the comment of saying every coach called and said thank you. Yeah, they're also saying thank you for taking one of your better players off the team. And if we do play against you guys, we might have a better chance at winning. So thanks for removing your best.
Yeah, it's what Matt said, is that they're both sides are losers in this situation. Something else that he kept reiterating is just how tough it is for a quarterback to find a spot in the spring, and you're not seeing a lot of willing partners. So if we even just put the Nico aspect and everything that comes with it aside, from a front office standpoint, how do you weigh what kind of quarterback to bring in during this spring period?
Emily, you remember I kept on talking about this anticipation board that this is when the anticipation board comes into effect, Coop, of understanding who you have that you can bring in that can facilitate your offense, that point guard that we're talking about. And it's Tennessee. Like, we can say that the money has some type of end to it, but there's not a value put on winning a championship. So, yes, we all might sit back and like, well, it's going to be a tough decision to get the right guy on. But no, money talks, BS walks. Good players understand that, especially a quarterback understands the high power of this offense, that you can really go in and in a few weeks get this offense, because it's not a complicated offense to run. And Heupel has shown all of us that he can teach it within time to function and get this done.
I think going into the spring portal without a quarterback or a viable quarterback option is not really a game plan at all. I think most teams are trying to get that done. You look at Maryland, for example, right? They bring in Malik Washington. They like the young freshman. He's got a good chance to start there under Pep Hamilton, Mike Loxley. They also bring over Justin Martin from UCLA. They did that in the December window. Plus, it gives them all the information possible to make an educated decision going into the fall about who their starter is going to be. For Nico and for Tennessee, both these camps, both personally and from a program standpoint, are behind the eight ball on the information gathering stage. So that's where the fork in the road is going to be for both these parties.
He's a really good quarterback. He's the number one prospect in this transfer portal cycle. Coop, what is it about him that made that a no-brainer to put him number one?
Well, I think you look at the overall talent. We can go back to the portal window as well in the winter, and there really wasn't a number one clear guy. I mean, you're talking about Isaiah World from Nevada, a guy that we boosted up the board after I went down to Mobile, and I saw some of the top tackles in the country work out at the Senior Bowl for the NFL draft. And looking at Isaiah World, his big frame, 300 pounds, it was like, okay, that's a guy we want to bet on. Damon Wilson's a guy that we want to bet on. John Mateer arguably might be the most impactful player in the transfer portal, but how does that really culminate when you start thinking about him as an NFL draft projection? With Nico, it's the same conversation of projection versus production. At the end of the day, we're talking about an elite level talent that has only started 1 year of football plus a bowl game, right? So this is still a young guy. And when I went back and I looked at the things that he did well versus the things that he's got to clean up, I came away more encouraged about the things that he's got to get better at because they're coachable. I mean, we're talking about things, from a internal clock standpoint that I think are things that can be repped out. he needs to play football, and he needs continuity, which is I think the saddest part of this whole situation when you look at it. He went to a place where you had the best of both worlds. He sat for a year. He also played early. He also played in a quarterback-friendly system. And this was a place that, quite honestly, with another year, they expected him to take another step. And if he would have stayed there, everybody wins. Tennessee wins. Nico wins as well. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I mean, we talked about it, and this is no disrespect to them. Think about the quarterbacks on the top of mind right now for the NFL draft here next week in Green Bay. Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Dart, those type of players. Outside of Cam Ward, Tyler Shuck. Those are all guys that are being talked about as potential first-round draft picks.
Jalen Milroe.
And you threw in Milroe. The other three that I'll say, you'll look at those guys from a physical trait standpoint. None of those guys wow you, but they know how to play the position. Nico wows you from a physical ability standpoint. He needs to learn how to play the position. That comes with experience. And unfortunately, he's in a situation right now, if he's not careful, he could harm his long-term development. But everything else is easily apparent when you watch him play.
Yes, 100% time on task. And it's hard to evaluate a player that hasn't played at least 2 consecutive seasons in the same system, same player, same understanding, same coaching, for him to repeat it over and over again. For all of us, we all know it. At the end of the day, when you're making throws with anticipation, being able to get out the pocket, move like this, and just whip the ball 50-plus yards on a line to a player, Coop, that's what you're looking for. The rest of it, we can fix. We just got to get you in our system and just get you time on task.
Smoke said something that's really important, time on task, but 2 years in the same system is really important. I mean, go back to Joe Burrow at LSU. Think about his draft stock before that 2019 season. Think about where Jaden Daniels was, right, a couple years ago. And then think about the continuity and the leaps that they took. Same with Bo Nix at Oregon. Being able to have consecutive years in the same system under the same play caller and understanding what's being asked of you is really, really important here. And here you see some of the plays that you're kind of talking about. You see the athletic ability, what he's capable of, slot fade, or against Alabama to go up here late in the game. He is a guy that has all the physical toolkits, and I'm glad we're kind of showing this because that's a touch ball. That's a little bit different than the things that he's being asked to do. There were a lot of opportunities in that offense, and people are probably looking at Tennessee and saying, what happened, right? This is one of the most dynamic offenses in college football. This stuff right here, you can't teach. They got him going at the end of the season as a runner, but you think about everything that he's capable of, everything's there. You watch 4, 5, maybe 6 times a game where there's just a disconnect. Maybe a ball is a little bit 2 or 3 yards high. You'll see it here. A linebacker drops, sails it 4 to 5 yards higher than it needs to be. These are the things, the timing, the anticipation, the ball placement. Those are all critical nuances to Tennessee's offense. Right here, 20 seconds left in the game, fourth quarter. All he needs to do, tie ball game, put it on him, right? And it's a game of inches, and you see it right there. Now that game goes into OT. They got to win it here. All right, this comes up as well. Fourth quarter against Arkansas, 6 seconds left, need a touchdown. It's simple. I get it, but you got to give your guy a chance. Those are the things that evaluators, coaches at the collegiate level, evaluators at the NFL level, they're going to ask. And we saw things like that. It's not the same things we saw with Justin Herbert when he threw it out of the back of the end zone against Auburn. People are saying, oh, hold on, where's this guy's kind of football awareness? Where's the play recognition? The more and more reps you get to feel that out for developmental prospects. He needs that. He does not have that. So the more ball he plays, the better position that he's going to be in, which is, like I said, I keep going back to this. He has compromised his long-term upside in financial security because he doesn't have the luxury in the type of intangible excellence not to be in a system where he's going to have continuity on his side. And that's where it is right now. So this is a really, really critical stage of his career.
Yeah, Coop, everything that we saw and just touched on, we can go back and watch games that layer throw over top of the second-level defender. Yeah, we've seen him do that. We've seen him step up and deliver a crossing route 20 yards on a rope. That's his repetition, foot placement over and over and over again, and getting coached. Understanding situational football. That's a young man trying to make a play and totally lost concept of time and placement. That's, again, Justin Herbert did that, but this guy's killing the NFL. So once you have a young man, like you said, in the system, over a period of time and go through those situational awareness plays, yeah, that's when you're going to get the high talent, and now the production comes with it. It just takes time, and both of those team and player look like they wanted to run out of time.
Yeah, and that was his first year as a starter. And so what you're saying is you're kind of resetting that clock, too, having to go learn a new system, find a new destination that could set him back in that development.
And I'll say this, I mean, you can be critical, and that's the era of college football that we're in, and we should be critical, for certainly a player that was ranked where he was ranked coming out of high school, a lot of lofty expectations. He didn't play a lot in high school. Yeah. The other part of this, you were 10-2 in the regular season. You came out of the toughest conference in college football, and you made a college football playoff appearance. Surely it didn't end up the way that you want it, but there was room for Nico to continue to grow. And I've said this, Tennessee's inactivity in the transfer portal window this December was an indication of how much confidence that they had in this young man going forward. So that kind of blows up everything too.
All right, we got a lot of people watching right now on YouTube. Thank you so much. I hate to ask more of you, but if you could, go ahead and hit that like button. That helps spread the word far and wide that we are talking all things spring transfer portal window here on this transfer portal Palooza. And we got to talk about the Tennessee side of things. Our friend Marcus Cartel on YouTube is asking, who would Tennessee get out of the portal that would fit their offensive philosophy? I think everybody just keeps saying it's a great destination for someone to go to, a quarterback-friendly offense. But if they had their pick of the litter, I mean, are there potential names that you think could fit well?
Yeah, there's names that I'm sure we've heard a lot on the Tennessee message boards, right?
Yeah.
A lot of those are pie in the sky.
Yeah.
We've heard
They're
Cade
dreaming.
Klubnik, we've heard Avery Johnson, we've heard Luke Altmaier. There's names maybe like Stephen Jelly that you should keep an eye out for. And that's kind of where this is, right? Like an Avery Johnson or Klubnik, that might be tough. Getting a guy like Altmaier out of Illinois could be really, really difficult because everything of what Chris Hummer said, those guys have the advantage of continuity. I mean, you're talking about year 3 for all those guys in that system. That's a big deal to take the flight risk to go to Tennessee, even with how friendly of an offense and a scheme that is. That's leaving a lot behind. So all the cases that we just made for Nico, we would be doing the opposite with the other guys that are really talented and say, hold on, we'll just leave your situation to go play at Tennessee. So alluding back to what Chris said in the beginning, which is I think they go get a veteran arm here. And I think if that guy's available, the problem is I think they're going to have a hard time shaking the tree to see like, all right, like a caliber of player that I think they would be able to get, that I think would be able to help them compete this year would be a guy like Miller Moss. Now he's at Louisville, I'm not saying that, but that would ideally be the type of player that you're looking for this year or the next 2 years. So Gio Lopez is a name that I brought up. It sounds like that one's almost done or at the finish line with North Carolina. So that would be another ideal
That's
guy.
the best one right now.
That's the best one right now that is currently available. And outside of that, I got to be honest with you, I'm having a hard time coming up with a name.
Coop, you know why you're having a hard time? Just like everybody else is, including everyone in that building in Tennessee. And one of the hardest things to do is, in being a general manager and a head coach, is bringing in a player that you know does not elevate your team. And you want to fool your team and want them to believe that, yes, this quarterback is the answer for us. No. The quarterbacks that's the best option for us just walked out of our building. So as much as we want to say go get the best one that's in the portal right now, you and I both know in order for Tennessee to get back to the level of 10-2 play, yeah, they're going to have to go to that anticipation board.
And it's important. Here's the other thing that's really important is like we can have a different discussion on like what level or what tier of quarterback prospect they should be after. But like if it doesn't work out with Merklinger, if it doesn't work out with McIntyre, you're in a really tough situation with 2 young quarterbacks that haven't played a lot of ball where you can rock their confidence. And listen, I know a lot of people, including myself, our team at 24/7 Sports has a ton of faith and conviction in Faison Brandon, but that's a lot to put on his shoulders as well, right? Even Nico had the benefit of redshirting his freshman year. So, this is a super tricky situation in Knoxville. Right now, I can't give you one name that's like, yeah, that one makes so much sense for both parties. And I think that's the hard part. Yeah, maybe it makes sense for Tennessee, but why would that quarterback want to leave their current situation?
Yeah, it's tough. I will point out with the Luke Altmaier situation, it's kind of ironic when he came back and said he was going to return for another season. Do you remember the drama at the basketball game? Illinois was playing Tennessee at the time, so I don't know if that's something that would happen again. But that's, another huge declaration of he wanted to come back for his senior year and he wants to play with the Illini. So message boards are not real life, but he can continue to dream. And we words to live by. But no, we'll definitely see what happens with the Tennessee situation. Of course, everything happening with Nico, too, is definitely going to be top of mind. That's what most of our YouTube comments look like right now, too. LL on YouTube says that, I think you're right. Do you want Oregon to take a shot at Nico, or do you want to see Dante Moore run the show? And so that's something that a lot of front offices and coaches and stuff are having to kind of weigh right now.
See, those are the $1 million decisions.
Yeah.
That most people think you just go in and just, okay, we're going to blow up our entire locker room by bringing somebody in on the first day of when the spring portal opens up, just so it can be okay. Yeah, Dante Moore's been doing a good job of being the quarterback right now and being a leader in that locker room. So once you have that quarterback that's established for your 15 practices, and also perceivably your leader of that team, you're gonna say, hey, you know what? Thanks for coming in, but we got that new quarterback coming in, and he's gonna be that new guy, and everybody in the locker room has to buy in. That's not as easily said as being done.
Yeah. Last thing, if Nico would have played maybe better last season. There would be some schools that would have taken him on at this point.
Easier pill to swallow.
Right. That's not the case.
All right. This is the biggest story of what's happening in the spring transfer portal window, but there's so much else to talk about. So for that, we bring back our Matt Zenitz and Chris Hummer to roll through some of the other headlines that are happening today and happening throughout the week. And I want to start with a guy that is on everybody's radar, it seems like, and that is South Dakota offensive tackle Joe Cotton. I say everybody's radar because the tweet, I think, that Chris Hummer initially posted with all the schools that are interested, I didn't see any schools missing from that list. I believe there were 24 different logos, so it seems like he is a hot commodity in this portal. Matt, what are you hearing on his front, and why is there so much interest?
Most importantly for Joe Cotton, and this isn't something on the list, but Cooper thinks highly of him. So that's the biggest compliment to Joe Cotton out of anything. But simply put, this 6'7", 315-pound offensive tackle was an all-conference player at South Dakota, has visits locked in at this point for Cincinnati and Wisconsin. But both of those places will have additional competition to be able to land someone who – I haven't checked the updated list, but the last time I looked was still among our top 5 ranked uncommitted players in the portal at this point.
Hummer, we've also had some movement coming out of Stanford with the head coaching change and everything that's happening there. A player that I know there's a lot of interest in, Julian Neal, the cornerback. What are you hearing on his front?
Yeah, another Cooper favorite. I know Cooper loves that guy. And he's an interesting one, right? Like, he only started 4 games for Fresno State last year, but I think a lot of teams are enamored with his length, ball skills, and his ability to kind of run with guys on the outside. There just aren't a lot of corners his size available in the open market. And he's been pretty popular. He was coming off a visit to Syracuse. His Fresno State defensive coordinator is now an analyst at Syracuse. He's at Virginia today, just arrived. And then other schools like Tennessee, Colorado, Minnesota, Auburn, Arkansas, USC have all been pushing for visits with Julian Neal. So he's a very popular guy. I think the family is taking the time with the process and kind of enjoying it a little bit. But he's been a very popular guy in the portal, and a lot of teams are in really big need of an outside cornerback right now.
The running back market has been something that's interesting to track over the last few days. Maybe a name that hasn't been mentioned as much as Shamar Brown out of North Dakota State. Chris, what are you hearing on his front and that interest?
Yeah, he's a really interesting player. I don't know if everybody's familiar with North Dakota State. They won the FCS National Championship this year, and he was a huge reason why. He ran for over 1,000 yards, ran for over 15 touchdowns, had a 90-plus PFF grade. Won the Jerry Rice Award, which is essentially the freshman Heisman in college football, or in the FCS. It's the same award Cam Ward won back in the day when he was at Incarnate Word, actually. And he had quite a career on the FBS level once he got there. And I think Chamar, who goes by Marty Brown, could have maybe not a Cam Ward impact, but a very big impact for his school next year. Talking to schools around the country, he is somebody with a huge upside. They really love him, talking to schools about his potential and his ability. to really be a game changer. He is somebody that schools like Miami, I think, will be very active with. Cal, who I know we're going to talk about in a little bit, would love a shot at Marty Brown as well. So he's going to be a very popular name in the portal. Not as sexy of a name, not as well known of a name as Jaden Ott, but I think he's somebody that schools view in a similar level. Not quite to that caliber, but very close.
Yeah, and a name that a lot of people know well is Micah Hudson. From the standpoint of this is not his first time in the transfer portal during this cycle. Initially out of Texas Tech, played as a freshman last year, then hit the transfer portal in December, went to Texas A&M. Now he is back in the transfer portal. Matt, what's next?
I think the most likely scenario is that he ends up in essentially a prove-it situation. I don't know where that's going to be yet, but Micah went to Texas A&M, became clear pretty quickly, or going back, what seems like a long time ago, that most likely wasn't going to be back with the team or wasn't expected to be back. And now officially in the portal as of today, that there is, I guess, a slim chance that they could maybe reunite with Texas Tech, which he originally signed with as a top 10 recruit. And if I remember correctly, the highest ranked recruit in school history. Right now, I view that as unlikely, which I think Chris would probably agree with, and he can correct me if I'm off base on that. But either way, regardless of where it is, I do think that Micah ends up in a prove-it type deal. Just don't have the thorough list as things stand as of yet on the schools that could be involved here, beyond just the slim chance that maybe something could come together with Texas Tech.
I should say, like, prove-it situation for sure, but I think Micah is still going to be a guy who ends up on the Power 4 level and have those opportunities. But I would also be surprised, based on what I've heard, if he ends up back at Texas Tech, even though the possibility isn't necessarily off the table.
Can't rule anything out at this point. Chris, you mentioned that Cal is in the market for running back. The big name to leave, of course, is Jaden Ott, but they've lost 5 total players at that position. Where do they go from here?
It's been a rough couple weeks in the portal for Cal, and in some ways a rough offseason when you go back to them losing Fernando Mendoza in the first place. But that's a program that's done a really good job overall in the portal, finding guys, finding gems, and I think they'll probably figure it out. I don't mean to dismiss the impact of a running back in college football. They have a really outsized impact on offenses sometimes, but there are a lot of really good backs in the portal right now that have popped up the last 24 hours, and I think Cal's going to be very aggressive. They have to be, with 5 of them stepping out the door to fill that hole. And they hired a new running backs coach this offseason, Julian Griffin, who came over from UTSA. He's somebody who's had multiple all-conference backs in his career, is pretty well respected in the space. I think they'll manage to figure it out, but Cal's just had kind of a tough road holding on to their guys this offseason for a variety of reasons.
And the shame of it for Cal, like Chris touched on, that there are some respected guys on that staff, not only from a coaching standpoint, but from a front office standpoint. And this is just the day and age that we're in with college football, where it's obviously far from the first time that we've seen a team get rated and lose key guys. And the unfortunate part for Cal is, going back to the winter cycle, they've lost players that were set to be some of their premier guys, or just frankly their premier guys heading into this season, starting with Fernando Mendoza, the quarterback, who is an NFL type talent back during the winter. And now during the course of the last few days, you have the 5 running backs who have gone into the portal, headlined by Jaden Ott, who before dealing with injuries last year was viewed by NFL scouts as a legitimate first-round possibility. You also have Javian Thomas, who ended up leading the team in rushing last year, who goes into the portal today. But let's not forget about other players like Jack Endries, the tight end also, who's somebody who's viewed as an NFL talented tight end. So it's been an unfortunate run for Cal overall in terms of losing some of these guys. But you can believe, like Chris touched on, that they'll be aggressive, be active, trying to find replacements. They've done a good job adding players through the portal during the course of the last couple of years, and obviously have their work cut out for them right now, just to replace some of this talent that has now left the program.
You mentioned Jack Endries, the tight end. While you two were talking, we popped up that breaking news on the screen. Another player from Cal hitting the portal. So a lot of holes to fill there, but I'm sure you guys will be all over when they do fill those holes and who they fill them with. Thank you both so much for being here. We appreciate it. All right, let's talk a little bit more about some of these players that were discussed. And I want to start with Micah Hudson because he's an interesting prospect from the standpoint of he was a 5-star coming out of high school, but entered the portal and, the portal team, you guys, you ranked him. But then now that he's back in the portal, you have to readjust that. So how do you view him now as a prospect?
Well, the same way we did just a few months ago as a player. And that was a guy that, a year before we ranked as a 5-star. So we obviously feel very good about the potential of Micah Hudson. That being said, the reality is of this business, it's what it is. You got to be able to play. And the best ability is availability. They say that because it's real, right? So for Micah Hudson, a guy that would be entering his third school less than a year and a half, this is not a good start to his football career. So I think the biggest thing for him is to get right off the field in terms of how we judge that is, this is a lot of change for a young man within the first 12 to 16 months of his career in college football. So that being said, he's going to have to be in a position where he finds a good fit, where he can get his feet under him. But the biggest thing is structure, right? Where do you go to where you feel like, all right, I can get back on track, and there's going to be a program that says, hey, we view you as a talented player, but we have the resources around us to invest in you to make sure that you're doing all the right things to be able to perform on Saturday nights when it's the most important. So it's touch and go. There's a lot of these guys that are really talented players, unfortunately, from the information that we have gathered, where I don't want to say we're betting, but right now the information leads us to believe that there's a ways to go until they can consistently be relied upon as impact players at the collegiate level.
Yeah, Coop, you hit it right on the head. My old boss, Doug Whaley, former general manager for the Buffalo Bills, would always tell me, Smoke, evaluate the talent and I'll evaluate the character. But at the end of the day, the character and the talent has to combine into the player. So you said it. The talent is there. Everything that you want from a receiver, from a route running ability, explosiveness, dynamic with the ball in his hands. But when is he readily available to us to use him? Not often. So, he has to probably step down a level to find himself, to go play again, and just see how much does he truly love football and how much does football make sense to him right now before we can all sit here and say we're going to bet on him and make him a part of the business. And when we say business, a.k.a. how much are you willing to pay for that talent and you don't know what you're going to get off the field?
I will say this, too. There are a lot of young men right now going through this situation where this is the most money that they have ever seen in their life, and they're 18, 19 years old, and they're dealing with it. And there's a lot of noise out there from family, from loved ones that they have to deal with the pressure of being financially invested in. So you're seeing a lot of guys right now that have already transferred multiple times, that guys that we had ranked high, right? So the ability to be able to handle not so much failure but success is really important for these guys and important for how we rank them going forward.
100%. Hey, if you are enjoying the content right now, go ahead and hit that like button on YouTube. We're watching all the comments, and you guys are having fun in there, so we appreciate you joining us, but go ahead and hit that like button. Speaking of, if there was a like button to hit on Hilo Meduzzi, I'm pretty sure that our friend Cooper Patagna would be hitting it over and over again. This is maybe an unheard of kind of guy coming out of West Point, but he entered the portal. You made him a top 50 prospect, a top 10 edge prospect. What do you like so much about him?
We thought about going higher, too.
Say it with your chest, Coop.
This is a kid late last night that I'm watching these names kind of filtering in, and our database team at 24/7 does a tremendous job getting these guys in and us turning around and getting them graded. And here's this kid from West Point Academy. It's the last guy that I watched of the night. And, this is a guy that edge rusher, sophomore, dynamic background, holds his school record in the long jump at 23 feet out of high school. The reason I bring that up, and Smoke knows this as well, but when you talk about these field events in track and field, especially the high jump, the triple jump, the long jump, it's an indicator of explosive power, especially in the lower half. And when you see a guy like Hilo Meduzzi, who out of high school was 195 pounds, now playing upwards of 240, the lower body explosiveness is not only important for his first step off the line of scrimmage, but it shows up in the hands. And for a guy that's floating around 6'3", 6'4", a lot of teams out there are going to say, is he long enough? the hands really, really stood out. And I love the activity. You can put him on ball, you can put him off ball. Exploded last year, 5.5 sacks for West Point, led the team. And this is one of those guys. You see the maturation as the season continues on, but you also see the ceiling of what the player can be as well. And then high-octane individual as well, just in terms of the way that he plays the game. So I'm excited about this kid. What's funny to me is, there's a name out there, Keanu Coate, that a lot of people will remember, who's from Alabama. They're built the same way. This is what everybody wants Keanu Coate to be. So I love this kid. I'm excited to see what his market looks like. Less than 24 hours ago, I had no idea he existed. So really excited to see how the next couple days unfold for him.
Coop, you were reading my mind when you were talking about edge pressure and the DPR, designated pass rusher. I think this is what this kid is right now. You walk him into any building, and he can get you 8 sacks. He's generated 35 pressures. That's total of hurries, sacks, and quarterback hits. Talking to my good friend Sean Cronin and my cousin Daryl Dixon. He's really not my cousin. We just say that. But both of those guys were on the staff last year at Army. And his name would always pop up in terms of a player that consistently, over the years, has gotten better and better and better. And the upside to this kid is untapped. So if you are a general manager and you're sitting at home right now and you're saying, oh, what we're going to get is just backups in this window, absolutely not. You're getting a kid right now that can come into your building and on third down, generate pressure and move that quarterback in order for you to get to the finish line, which is the national championship.
And I'll say this, like my hypothetical tinfoil hat type of deal. Michigan's had a lot of success with these guys. You look at Josiah Stewart that they took from Coastal Carolina a couple years ago, who's going to the NFL draft.
Absolutely.
Going to be a DPR. These guys, there's a world in where these guys can not only exist but excel, and we've seen them down at the Senior Bowl in Mobile. Guys from Boston College, guys from UCLA.
Marshall.
Those guys are really kind of the names that draw a lot of attention from NFL evaluators. So I think we're on the front end of this one. I'm confident in him. Like I said, I'm very, very excited kind of see where his next home is going to be.
Cool, but a lot of things that you can't hide is production. If you can get to the quarterback, put the quarterback on the ground, that's awesome. But if you can affect the quarterback 30-plus times, I don't care what level you're playing at, that's telling me as a decision maker in a war room, yeah, we need to get our hands on that because we all know third down wins games. You need closers. And this guy has closing ability and all the characteristics that tells you that he can be an upside of a very, very good pass rusher.
It's funny that you mentioned Michigan as a possible fit for him because for some reason, everybody wants to talk about Michigan tight ends in the chat right now. We've got a question from Richie Dubs asking us to talk about the returning tight ends. Shuggles is saying that they're the best. For some reason, everybody is very interested in what is happening at the tight end position with Michigan. Care to elaborate or
Well, that's
shed some light
interesting.
on
I mean,
it?
Colston Loveland's off to the NFL, right?
Yeah, they're wondering what's next.
We'll see. Hogan Hansen is a kid that we like from Washington, really talented kid. I mean, outside of that, Michigan is one of those teams I think you and I talked about. What does it look like outside of Bryce Underwood? We know they're going to play good football up front. That's their MO as a team. Like their backfield with Justice Haynes. Receivers, I think, are a question mark. And then I think the tight ends, a little bit of TBD. That's
Right.
where I stand at least. I haven't done a full deep dive into this niche conversation of Michigan tight ends. But, you're losing a potential top 50 pick in Colston Loveland here in the next week or so. So going to
Cool.
be
You
interesting.
spent a little bit of time in Michigan, didn't you?
A cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing that you know right now, the players on the outside, meaning receivers, they can walk away and be like, whatever. Tight ends, running backs, offensive linemen, they develop those guys. So even though we might not say there's a name at the top, in 2 years you might walk away and be like, dang, where did they find that joker again?
Yeah, Luke Schoonmaker
know
was
it.
one of those guys.
Yeah.
They do a tremendous job. I'm not saying that guy's not in
Yeah.
there. I'm saying maybe he's there.
In time.
We just got to see.
Yeah.
We do have to see. All right, let's talk about some more of these prospects. A player that you were part of his recruitment at UNC, the defensive lineman Bo Atkins. He entered the portal. He was their sack leader last year. Atkinson, what kind of player just hit the portal?
Coop, you and I sat down this morning, and the first thing I came in with my tea in hand, I said, hey, listen, we got to get a hold of
gotta
it, bro.
talk about it.
We got to talk about 6'6", 250 pounds of just sheer high motor, and when I use the word slippery, for a guy that big, you can see him get his body, get skinny between blockers, surface big, and make splash plays. And again, Coop, when we talk about pass rushers, effort, motor, hands, leverage, He has 1,000% of all of that, plus some more. And he plays with a little bit of fire wrapped up underneath his butt and his pads.
Yeah, these guys.
It's a good thing.
These
Right?
guys are the ones that are typically overlooked by people by myself, and what I mean by that is you're always looking for the extra inch, right? Whether it's in the arm length or the wingspan or whatever it is. Hey, what this guy time out in the 40 or their 10-yard split. Bo Atkinson was one of those guys. Was a high cut guy, high floor guy coming out. You knew what you were getting. But there are a lot of teams out there in that region from where he was coming out of that were saying, you know what, there's better options on the table. Big season for him last year, 7.5 sacks, showed out in the spring showcase for North Carolina as well. This is a guy that is a little reminiscent of Jack Pyburn, that jumped in the portal from Florida,
Great call.
Went to LSU, and he's going to be a high floor guy that you can plug and play. There have been a lot of murmurs that Georgia needs to add some depth in that room. We'll see. It takes a certain caliber player, athlete to play edge at Georgia. So, I would look at Mr. Atkinson as one of those guys that's probably going to have a pretty hot market here.
Yeah, Atkinson had 7.5 sacks last year, so tough loss for North Carolina to lose him. But there's a kind of a unique player in a unique situation that, we let you talk about your guy, so we're going to let Coop talk about.
I got a lot of guys.
You do have a lot of guys. As Chris Hummer pointed out earlier, Ferris State cornerback Trinidad Chambliss, he transferred to Ole Miss yesterday, which maybe is underrated move, but what intrigues you so much about this?
Well, this is a great way to tie in what we were talking about earlier. The good teams that are trying to elevate the great. Mm-hmm. Ole Miss was one of the most active teams in the portal. They have been in college football over the last 3 years, number 3 ranked transfer portal class in the December window. They're just trying to find a way to throw a different wrinkle out there, and they have a pocket passer that I think might sound crazy, but more physical upside than Jackson Dart, who's probably getting ready to go in the first round. I'm very high on Austin Simmons and what he can be. I love what they did in that first portal window in the winter. And then you think at Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin, they're not back there with the feet kicked up and saying, all right, we're ready for ball, let's get ready for fall camp and summer. They're saying, all right, well, what way can we maybe throw a different wrinkle at teams that they haven't seen before? Right. And for people out there that aren't familiar with Trinidad Chambliss, he's a guy right here that you could put in the Thomas Castellanos category. You could put him in the Vernon Adams Jr. from years ago if you're one of those old heads, right? This is a guy that's dynamic on the ground, over 1,000 yards rushing last year at Ferris State, and a guy that went 14-1, has a lot of accolades with him, but you can see the shiftiness, the dynamic ability in the open field as a runner. And for Austin Simmons, he's a guy, quite honestly, that is an athletic player himself, but they're going to have to keep him healthy. Trinidad Chambliss is an established player that I think this is a guy they look at and they say, all right, well, we lose J.J. Pegues to the NFL, a guy that actually accounted for a lot of their rushing production in the goal line red zone area. You think about what Chambliss can add, a little bit different of a wrinkle there that I think SEC teams, they're going to have to account for that. So I like it one way or the other.
Yeah, defensive coordinator staying up all night trying to figure out what is this package going to look like. All you're creating is just an extra advantage for yourself as a play caller. And again, if you have that pretty Ferrari back there, Austin Simmons, you don't want that car to get touched that much. So you get this kid in and you run him. And every now and then he can throw, but he's in there for his legs. And Coop, we talked about this earlier, protecting your assets and protecting your locker room. You don't want to go down the same road that, we don't want to keep going on this, that Tennessee had to go down, where your backup is not as talented as the guy in front of you. So when you create that pressure, now you, as that building general manager, head coach, you've created the leverage on your locker room to say, hey, you know what? If you come in here barking about playing time, money, I can easily tell you know what? Walk out and leave. And that's what I believe that this transfer portal window can do for you if you're general manager and you're setting up your team properly. Create advantages for yourself by the old school way of competition.
And I'll say this too. Ole Miss is not afraid to overpay for depth in their quarterback room. They did that with Spencer Sanders, the guy that was an established starter in the Big 12. So, this is Ole Miss just doing what they do.
Just doing what they do. A Division II All-American. So has that talent. And as these guys say, expect to see him play. Hey, we've got some breaking news here on transfer portal Palooza. Maryland starting linebacker Caleb Wheatland has entered the portal. This is per our Chris Hummer. Smoke, your face says it all, but if you could tell me what you're thinking right now, that would be
Yeah,
great.
because the crazy thing, Emily, I just had a conversation with Caleb 2 weeks ago when I was up there.
Okay.
And we were just talking about life after football, how much he was enjoying the experience of Maryland football and how much he believes in what Coach Lockley's been doing there. But, again, I was a part of the system that created that competition in that locker room and the depth. If you look at Maryland's depth chart, yeah, they're rolling about 6 or 7 deep at the linebacker position. And sometimes when you see that, and he's been banged up for this spring, hasn't been out there practicing, and those young guns, those Thundercats like I used to call them, are nipping at your heels, at times it's best to just walk away and say, you know what, I might need to start over somewhere else and leave this competition alone just because I don't know if I'm going to come out on top. Good job by Coach Lockley and some guy named Smoke for creating some type of competition in that daggone locker room. So if Caleb walks out, you're not begging him to stay. You're saying, hey, listen, I
He'll be
appreciate everything that you've done for us here in Terpsville, but there's some young guys behind you that's willing to take those reps.
It's funny how it works out, just in terms of the conversation. You really never have a pulse on which way these guys are leaning. So how it may look one day, fast forward a couple weeks later, and then all of a sudden they're in the portal, and it's a completely different change of trajectory in their career.
Cool, but a lot of these guys are pocket watching, man. Pocket watching across that locker room, trying to figure out who's getting what, how much they're getting, and not really counting their own coins in their pockets.
Sounds exhausting.
It does, yeah. 42 tackles for him, 4 sacks.
Great kid, good
last
player.
season. Great kid, good player has now hit the portal. That breaking news that Caleb Wheatland has officially entered the portal out of Maryland. Going back to talking about some of the prospects who are already in the portal, and a name that has come up quite a bit on this show already, but I feel like we need to dig a little bit more in depth with him. Gio Lopez, coming out of South Alabama. The initial reports were that he was headed to North Carolina. Of course, that is not quite done yet, but is a prospect who is technically still available. So we'll start with our North Carolina representative here with the
colors.
the nice coat. I mean, you're both kind of wearing your blue.
Yeah.
What kind of prospect is Gio Lopez?
This is a guy that's ready to play, and you think back to Bill Belichick and his time in New England, and this is why he's really unique. He was judge, jury, executioner, right? Just in terms of the leash that he had from the owner, Robert Kraft. He was the guy calling the shots in terms of everything that they did from a front office standpoint. He was always really, really good at finding ways to add value to his team through distressed assets. What I mean, guys that had to come on prove-it deals, right? And I'm not saying that's Gio Lopez, but if you look at Gio Lopez, you put him out in the open market, he's 6 feet, he's 200 pounds, he's a redshirt freshman, and this is a guy that's going to be overlooked for a lot of different reasons. And I said it with Bo Atkinson, a lot of programs around the country can get caught up in the height, weight, speed philosophy of, hey, we want the NFL type of feel, look, type of talent, that type of athlete to walk through our locker room. That's not Gio Lopez. You're not acquiring this guy for what he can be on Sunday. You're acquiring him because of his ability to help you win on Saturday. And this is a guy that was a lot of fun. I like his ability on the ground. He is a bigger version, and kind of reminds me, I want to be careful here, but there's some similarities in his game of kind of like Dylan Gabriel. Plays well within the structure. I think he's a nimble athlete in space. You have to respect his legs as a runner. And like I said, I brought up Tennessee because I kind of thought he'd be a fit in that offense. But if you're looking at North Carolina and you're looking at the room, you're looking at Max Johnson, probably doesn't get a lot of North Carolina fans excited. You're thinking about another player, and Ryan Brown, I believe his name is, that came over from Purdue. And then you have young Bryce Baker, who seems to be, a guy that they're really high on as a potential future there. So who's the guy, right? This is at least another guy that started double-digit games that can add some competition to that room. And I really like this kid. And if he does end up at North Carolina, I would have to guess that he would probably be the guy that's going to be the starter come fall.
Coop, fun tape to watch. The lefty, quick release, smooth, accurate, can do it on the move, RPO game. Coop, this is the point guard that we talked about on Monday. Just to get on your team, just get the ball into the right player's hands at the right time. He reminds me, just like you said, great call with Dylan Gabriel, a little bit more Leah Tungavailoa, just a left-handed version of it. Ability to operate in a quick game, have enough arm strength to get it downfield, but also has enough athleticism to create off-script RPO game quarterback run. Great find by these guys if he does land there, because now he elevates that entire quarterback room.
And I'll say this too, like program awareness. I talk about that. That's really important. It's a really important intangible for a head coach to have. What I mean by that is you got Nico Iamaleava out there, one of the most talented players in the country, sitting there that North Carolina could probably go in on and get. Quite honestly, they could probably pay him $2 million, get him on a discount of what they think they would pay him. And they're going in a different direction, saying, you know what, maybe it doesn't match our timeline. Maybe everything that's transpired doesn't fit for what we want right now. We want positive attention on this program. And they're able to spend money elsewhere. And they've done a really good job, especially defensively. They've done some really exciting things. So this is a mature move from the elder statesman and Bill Belichick and Michael Lombardi.
Yeah, and Michael Lombardi just having an understanding of what that locker room looks like and what's the feel coming out of his building. He knows you don't need to go in there and stir the pot. All you need to do is just put a spoon in that pot to make sure we can cook it the right way.
All right, we have a tweet that we want to show you. We're paying attention to everything that's happening in the transfer portal world today. An interesting one here from Colin Coward. I'm told moments ago that Nico Iamaleava is going to UCLA. The family still claims it's not about the money, it's about the offense. Tennessee football. I was not told what the Bruins are paying here. UCLA and Nico. What do we think of that?
Shout out to my man Smoke.
Yeah,
getting it done.
I want to start with what Colin Coward said about, he heard it was not about the money and he heard it was about the roster. We heard that at times. I just don't know, and I get it. It's the result of the situation at hand. Is this a better situation for him to go into? And I think that's Tino Sinceri over there, the new offensive coordinator that comes over from Indiana, right? You think about UCLA, what they've had there in the past, and it was Eric Bieniemy last year, right? So this is a young offensive coordinator in his first year at UCLA, and you look at what do they have surrounding him as well? What does that offensive line look like? And I'll tell you this, that's a situation that I have to read into, but for when Dante Moore went there a couple years ago as a freshman, that was the biggest thing. He wasn't protected, right? So we talk about fit and what that looks like.
Is it better at UCLA than it would have been at Tennessee?
That's what I don't know. If you want my honest opinion on that, I don't have the, encyclopedia brain to go in on UCLA right now on their offensive line. But, is this a better situation than the one that he left in Tennessee? I would probably say probably not, right? So we'll see. And obviously we're still waiting on confirmation if that happens, but not shocked if it would end up being UCLA.
Yeah, Coop, I'm going to say that offensive line, UCLA comparable to Tennessee, no. What they have going on at Tennessee, just in personnel-wise, that's going to be absolutely not. We're going from a top-tier 10-2 team, playoff team, to one of the middle tier to bottom third Big Ten programs. Now, what's the benefits of going to UCLA? They have an opportunity to grow, get an offense that fits his skill set, grow with Coach Sinceri, Tino Sinceri, and so he can properly get developed. That's what he did to Ethan Rourke up there at Indiana last year. And you're just basically you're on the hope that this works out, that you can go back home, escape a little bit, be comfortable in their offense, and grow. That's all it is. This is a hope. This is not a bank shot. This is for sure. It's not. Because the number one option that you wanted to have was to stay in Knoxville and grow with that offense. So they're just trying to figure it out their daggone self. Hitting the reset button, saying, you know what, we're going to start all over again, rebrand ourselves, and figure it out if we can do it in the Big Ten, because the SEC thing didn't work out for us.
Yeah, and let's talk about Nico for a little bit. Probably the best thing for him to get closer to home right now with everything that's going on. Get closer to maybe a little bit more of a supporting cast for him that he's comfortable in, because right now, given he's been the talk of everything social media, not even just college football, but over the last couple of days, and a lot of that obviously self-inflicted, but I wouldn't blame him for going back to UCLA.
There's kind of an interesting backstory here as well with the Iamaleava family, in that his younger brother Madden was committed to UCLA and decommitted and flipped to Arkansas on National Signing Day, and now they are having a second chance at an Iamaleava brother. Is that something that we should take into consideration at all? I mean, there's relationships
start here. I think
there, right?
UCLA, with all due respect, with Deshaun Foster, they're a program with not much of an identity right now. Right. They don't really know who they are. They don't know who they're trying to be. They don't know whether they want to live in high school or whether they want to live in the transfer portal. Yeah. So they see this big shiny thing right now, Nico Iamaleava, that to them they say, oh, that's attractive. Mm-hmm. To everybody else, it's pretty toxic, right? But it's a way to kind of jumpstart their program, not only from a perception standpoint, but a talent standpoint at the quarterback position. They bring in the quarterback from Appalachian State this year. That's easily one that they could talk themselves into, and bringing in Nico to usurp that type of player. So we'll see. I understand why UCLA would do that. Like I said, I say that with all due respect to Deshaun Foster, first-time head coach going into his second year, trying to find some momentum.
Not a bad win. I mean, the best quarterback in the portal you get, I mean, you're not losing anything at all. And we see that sometimes relationships can get mended if you have the right representation walking in the building to set the playing field for everybody can understand. This is the business portion of it. Forget the emotions of the younger brother walking out. The older brother's coming in saying, hey, listen, I figured it out. I want to be a quarterback. I'm going to shut my mouth and go to work. And that's what I would tell them. Go hide. And yet you're playing, do your talking. Don't say anything. The wins will come. The production will come.
Yeah. Once again, this is just an interesting report that we saw from Colin Cowherd saying that Nico Iamaleava is committing to UCLA, but our own Matt Zenitz has been talking with his sources and has not heard anything on it yet. So as soon as we get any sort of confirmation or clarification, we will bring that to you. So this is all the things that are happening in the spring transfer portal window. But if we look at the 2025 cycle as a whole, a lot of talent has moved around the board. Most of the impact players in this cycle did come out of that December window. So our team site reporters from all across the country give us the biggest pickups from the start of the portal cycle.
So far, so good for new Oklahoma quarterback John Mateer. Since transferring over from Washington State back in the winter following his offensive coordinator Ben Arbuckle, John Mateer has done virtually everything imaginable to give Oklahoma and Oklahoma fans belief that he is the guy to help right the ship on this OU offense, which was such a disaster in 2024. He ingratiated himself with the fan base back in the winter, showing up at gymnastics meets and basketball games. And he followed that up with a great spring. He made plays on the field. He provided some leadership, and he helped teach this Ben Arbuckle offense to all of his new teammates after he excelled in it a year ago with the Cougars. It's only been a couple of months, and it's just spring camp. And it's not going to mean anything if he doesn't do it in the fall and certainly in games in the SEC coming up later this year. But to this point, it's been an A+ for John Mateer. He's checked every box. And at this point, if you're Oklahoma, you've got to feel pretty confident that John Mateer is, in fact, the answer and the right guy to help right the ship and lead you through year 2 in the SEC.
So when Missouri got Damon Wilson back in the December portal window, obviously a huge deal, number 3 overall transfer and all that. Missouri is looking for that guy to be just a pass rushing terror off the edge. They've had some good production the last few years. Johnny Walker last year, Darius Robinson the year before, who actually worked himself into a first-round pick. Maybe haven't had a guy that's as prototypical at that position as Wilson is in quite a while. Just last week, we talked to Eli Drinkwitz. He called his defensive end room among the best in the country. He hesitated before he said it. And then he said, no, I'm going to go ahead and say it and let him deal with the expectations. Damon Wilson right in there with another former Georgia player in Darius Smith coming off an injury. Zion Young coming back from last year. Javion Hilson, a 5-star recruit. It's a group that Missouri thinks it easily goes 3 deep at, maybe even 4 deep at. And I think Damon Wilson is expected to be right among the leaders of that group this year.
So FSU is going to wrap up spring camp feeling comfortable with what it has in Tommy Castellanos in terms of how he's managed a fairly new offense for him, although he was experiencing the Gus Malzahn offense as a freshman, but it's been some time. One aspect that's been difficult to gauge what the entire offense will look like is the amount of injuries that Florida State has had at wide receiver and the offensive line. Deuce Robinson, who was awesome the first half of spring, has missed the back half with an ankle injury, not expected to be super serious, but that makes it difficult to tell exactly what you have in explosiveness and what the full offense will look like. One other area with Tommy Castellanos, I will note, they like how he's protected the football. They like how he's managed the offense. You really can't get a sense for how he's going to move, though, because the quarterbacks are kept clean throughout most of spring camp, too. So without contact, it's tough to really get a gauge of that special sauce of what Tommy Castellanos brings in terms of mobility. But for the most part, FSU likes what it has there. Feels pretty comfortable with what it has with its offense entering the 2025 season.
All right, one of the most dynamic prospects in all of college football, John Mateer, Smoke. I mean, you think about this kid, man. Number 6 prospect in the country, in the winter transfer portal. No shortage of the hype train slowing down there in Norman. Now they add Jaden Ott, one of the best running back prospects in the country in the portal as well. What's your feel on the type of impact that John Mateer can have under Brent Venables?
Cool. You want to give me a scale from 1 to 10. I'm going to go up all the way up to 8, 9. I don't think you're going to have another impactful player like this that can come in your building in the December cycle to completely transform the way that your offense looked last year. We know how it looked last year. Trash. You sent the guy out of your building. No, honestly, Coop. I mean, we can both. You bench your starting quarterback and fire your OC, and you get the quarterback that threw for 3,000 yards, rushed for 1,000, and can completely transform your entire offense. And you also bring in his offensive coordinator with him. So what you're saying is we're going all in, and this is the answer for our program on offense.
Is there a, like, you know, we talk about this. I kind of brought it up last year with Cam Ward. I think he made Miami maybe 3. You could argue even 4 wins better. John Mateer, I think you could say, yeah, maybe he's the difference for us winning, 5 games and winning potentially 8 games for Oklahoma this year. Player comparison, anybody kind of jump out when you watch him?
You know what? He gives me a little bit of Baker Mayfield type of feel to him. Just how easily he flicks the ball out of his hands. But when he does flick the ball out of his hands, he throws it with power. Better legs than Baker, but just how he creates plays, second, off script. He gives you that opportunity now in college football. And we know the number one equalizer in college football on offense is a quarterback that can create off script plays and has mobility with his legs.
Big topic of conversation in Norman is that offensive line. How important is it for you, especially like a former general manager? You've been in Maryland, you've been in NFL front offices. When you have an offensive line that's either young and developing or inexperienced, how important is it for an offensive coordinator to have a quarterback that he can trust to get it done on the ground?
Easy. It makes life so much simpler. It gives you the opportunity to go into game planning now and put more on that quarterback's shoulders. And especially if I know my quarterback and this quarterback knows my offense inside and out. So the thing about when you play the quarterback position, Coop, a lot of players that are new to the system are only running the plays that are being called. When John Mateer goes into this offense, he's understanding the reason why Ben Arbuckle's calling the plays. So even if he calls it wrong, John can fix it. And now when you have an offensive line that you can say, it's inconsistent, lacks continuity right now, with that quarterback play, you can fix it because everything does not have to be perfect with this guy. You might have a lookout block, and you know what he does with his legs? Fix it. With his eyes still downfield with the ability to create explosive plays both ways, legs and with his arm.
Last guy I want to touch on real quick, Jaden Ott, the big pickup for the Sooners yesterday. Jim Nagy getting work done already there in Norman. You think about Jaden Ott, we've talked about the type of player that he was in 2023. A lot of people thought this guy was going to be high day 2 NFL draft choice. Here's the thing, though. You look at DeMarco Murray's running back room. They got some dudes already, right? Javonte Barnes. You think about Gavin Sawchuk. You think about guys like Taylor Tatum.
Competition.
So where do you think, I guess my question is, why go out and get another guy like Jaden? Obviously, the talent it speaks for itself. But in a room where you already have a couple different assets that have been proven, why go get one more guy?
See, this is what happens when you go in, Coop, and they start throwing millions at the general manager to have what you want in that locker room, and that's open competition. And make sure that you're protecting yourself in the building. So if one of those running backs might have had a conversation about leaving or whatever, you say, you know what, it's okay. Leave, because what I'm bringing in is just as good. And when you talk about Jaden's talent, Coop, 3-down back, can make you miss in a phone booth. And I know that I'm old, 44 years old, in tight quarters. And he has enough vertical speed to score, like you saw him get down the left sideline, but also has hands in the passing game. So you have a 3-down running back to come in to pair with your quarterback and run some zone reads. Make sure that young offensive line, you have a running back there that if you do have one of those lookout blocks again, I can make the defender miss and make sure that we have a positive play now to keep the drive going.
I think
Smooth move by Nagy.
Yeah, I think Oklahoma is one of the most intriguing teams in college football this year, just in terms of like ceiling and floor. How high could they go? Could they win 9 games? Could they win 5 games? Right? We'll see. Jaden Ott, John Mateer, they're going to be fun. We know that.
But that's Jim Nagy stacking his roster the right way. And like we talked about, 1, 2, 3 going into it and looking at the rep chart instead of the depth chart. If number 1 goes down and you're in a tandem role, 2 should come in. And the only drop-off is just playing time or experience. And if 3 comes in, again, same thing, just lack of playing time. But the talent is still the same, and we can operate our offense the same way.
Big year ahead in Norman. We'll see what happens. Like I said, it's going to be a lot of fun. All right, let's talk about the Missouri Tigers. Damon Wilson, one of those names that got brought up, one of the few 5-stars, one of only 3 right now when you think about it. This kid, highly touted, coming out of the state of Florida. Smoke, when you turn on the tape, man, just a disruptive guy, ready to explode. It seemed like one of those guys that Georgia would have loved to have him back, going to Mizzou for more opportunity. The reviews out of spring camp already are relatively high. What type of player is Damon Wilson going to be for Mizzou?
Like you said, disruptive and prototype. And when you want to complete your defense and you want to get now into the playoffs, we talked about it earlier. You have to get a closer, someone that can come off the edge and either ask or tell you that you need to give me a double team, chip on me with a running back. But if you don't, I'm going to make your right tackle or left tackle not be able to stay up on those Friday nights that he has to block me. And again, it looks like one of those Georgia creatures again, doesn't it? And when Georgia typically loses an edge rusher and they want to keep them, it's lack of playing time. Like you said, I just need playing time, a little bit of feet on grass in order to get my production level up.
I want to talk Mizzou a little bit. I'm glad we're going to talk Mizzou. I think they're one of the sneakiest teams just in terms of what they've been able to do from the high school side to the college side, how they're blending talent acquisition on both sides of this. I mean, you go down the list. You get the quarterback in Bo Prabula. You got Damon Wilson as well. You pair him with Nate Johnson. So that's a lot of production coming into that room. I think it's going to be
you're using
one of
the
best
word pairing because you're matching your team the right way. Keep on going,
Correct.
GM.
And then you have Darius Smith as well. They bring over Keegan Trost from Wake Forest, a guy that they like a lot. Ahmad Hardy, big freshman year, comes over from ULM. They've done some really, really nice things. And I keep going back to this kind of definition that I talk about, like program awareness. We know who we are. Right. Missouri very quietly has kind of worked their way up the pecking order to be a really desirable spot for a lot of guys in the SEC that, hey, you know, maybe they say, well, you know, it's not Georgia or it's not Oklahoma, it's not Texas or LSU. This is not a slight against Mizzou. Mizzou's kind of feasted off of that, in my opinion.
Quiet moves get loud results. And what I mean by that is all of those aren't splash pieces. Those are just nice pieces that you're adding to the puzzle to pair with each other. So when you go through your season and then come back and end, how much did we spend? We spend a lot of good money because what we spend, we got true production out of that. Because we know sometimes those loud pickups and the guys that was ranked number 1, not knocking your class, Coop, but sometimes when you spend for that number 1, you can't get 3, 4, and 5. That's going to make your team a true competitor by adding depth.
How good of a job, I don't even want to say, I don't even want to talk about the coaching, how good of a job has Eli Drinkowitz done, big picture, to build up Missouri from a talent acquisition standpoint from when he got there to what it is now?
He's done an outstanding job. He's getting draft picks out of there and good players that match what his eyes are saying and what he needs to get out of his team. Whenever you look at the head coach and the general manager, you want to make sure that you're aligned. And we always talk about alignment. The head coach and general manager should be able to both sit down and have a heated discussion about players, prospects, and who they're adding onto their team. But the GM should also understand that this picture that's getting painted is through the eyes of Drink. Drink knows how he wants his team. He just probably does not know how to get it. But he understands what it is. So whoever's lined up in front of Missouri this year, Coop, like you said, sneaky. I don't know how sneaky you're going to get whenever you're 6-0, 7-0. and you're getting ready to make that playoff.
I don't think they're sneaking up on anybody anymore.
Not when you tell them that. You're telling the whole world that.
Yeah, and he's got some dog to him. So Eli Drinkwitz, a necessity if you're going to be a coach there.
He's standing on business again, isn't he?
At Missouri, absolutely. Let's talk about another team, this one in the ACC, Florida State. And I just want to ask you straight up, your confidence level that Mike Norvell, Gus Malzahn, and the pairing of Thomas Castellanos, bringing in Deuce Robinson at receiver, is it enough to exercise the demons of what we saw last year?
Exercising the demons and winning only a few games. What did they win last year? 3, 4, 2? Ooh, God. Okay, so we got to get it.
Might need a fact check there.
So we got to get up to 8 or 9. I do like the pairing of these two, and I do like the pairing of Gus Malzahn with Thomas Castellanos. Just putting him in the offense that you know that he can function in. Great mobility in terms of running the football, RPO, quarterback run. But you and I sat back in December and said, yo, go back and just study his film. He's a better thrower than we give him credit for. And when Florida State was rolling off and they went undefeated, they had some big receivers, didn't they? Throwing Deuce Robinson back into that. At some point, you have to be able to throw the ball up on 50-50 balls, and somebody's going to have to come down with that catch. And I think that's what they're doing a good job of. And again, we talk about pairing your quarterback with the ability to run your offense, fit into what you want to do in terms of quarterback run, RPOs, moving the pocket because he's a smaller quarterback. And when you move the pocket, you want to throw up 50-50 balls to a big receiver that can go up and go get it.
What's this year got to look like from Mike Norvell? Like, what's it like? You're in that building. You're saying, Coach, we got to get to this number of wins. This is what we got to do to get this thing back on track.
Coopers, the ACC, we got to get to 9. Figure a way to get to 9.
It's going to be tough, huh? Time on task. That's what it is. Yep. Speaking of college football playoff contenders, we're going to send it over to Gabby Uridia at Inside the U for more on Miami.
The spring transfer portal window is upon us, and I expect the Miami Hurricanes to be an extremely active player during this talent acquisition season. Last year, Mario Cristobal utilized this window to acquire guys like running back Damian Martinez, defensive end Tyler Barron, defensive tackle Simeon Barrow, and wide receiver Sam Brown. I think the Hurricanes are once again going to look to upgrade the 2025 roster. On the offensive side of the ball, with Carson Beck at quarterback, I think Miami is going to look for ways to upgrade at wide receiver. On the outside, if there is a no-brainer, highly productive outside guy that emerges into the talent pool, I think Miami is going to explore that option. Miami likes some of their in-house options in the slot, but if a productive, proven veteran comes into the spring transfer portal window, Miami could perhaps explore that option as well. On the defensive side of the ball, there's a couple of different ways that Miami could choose to upgrade or tweak their roster, but I think some of the most important positions they need to target are linebacker and a number 2 safety to play alongside Zechariah Poyser, who they acquired during the winter transfer portal cycle. They're extremely excited about. I think if Miami can address wide receiver, if they can add another linebacker, and they can get a true number 2 safety to play alongside Poyser, Mario Cristobal and the Hurricanes are going to be really, really excited about what this roster looks like heading into the 2025 season.
All right, we're excited to welcome on Brad Crawford to talk more about Miami and some other contenders and what holes they need to fill. But Brad, I'm sorry to start off our segment by throwing you for a loop. We've just been tracking everything that is happening today with Nico Iamaleava, and we have a little bit of news to report here. According to Tracy Pearson of Bruin Report Online, UCLA has an NIL offer out to the Tennessee transfer quarterback that is well below the reported asking price. Industry insiders don't think that UCLA will get him with the offer, but right now there aren't many other viable offers on the table for him. Brad, I'll let you react to this first. What do you think?
I think it's a bad situation for Joey Aguilar, the App State quarterback who signed with UCLA back in December. I was told at the Rose Bowl, Emily, that Joey's NIL deal at UCLA was around $1.2 million. So if UCLA does sign Nico, let's throw a figure out there, $2 million, and they're paying $3.2 million for their quarterback room this fall and really overpaying for a backup. So Joey can't go back to App State now, and now Nico Iamaleava has to decide, do I play for UCLA? Do I wait and see what's out there? Matt Zenitz and Chris Hummer, our guys, have already reported throughout the day that these interest right now in Nico outside of Los Angeles is pretty meager nationally. So I think if I'm Nico, I probably accept this offer from UCLA, even if it's less than what I was being paid with the Vols last season.
Brad, afford who you can afford to be. It's real simple. If you know that your value is $4, $3, $2, whatever $1 million it is, as a prospect, you just want to go back out there and just play football and earn your way back. Get off that nasty stain, because the advice that you got to walk out of that building in Tennessee wasn't good enough. So now whoever is representing him, whatever the best offer is on the table, take it. Because in a few years, if you can go out there and you can play really good football, we understand that the world's forgiving. UCLA is forgiving that family if they take this young man in. Because last time I checked, my good buddy Ted White, the quarterback coach, now at Maryland, was at UCLA, said they screwed him, flipped him to Arkansas. So take the best bet and understand who you are and just go to work and play football.
Yeah, for UCLA, they're doing something that nobody else is doing right now. They're saying, we want you. We'll take you. Come in here. And we got Tino Sinceri, a guy that worked with Curtis Rourke last year, a guy that's going to play in the NFL, a guy that played on a torn ACL, and that's a guy that's got a lot of bravado, Tino Sinceri, right? So this is a team right now that is willing to invest and grow with Nico Iamaleava. And you look around for Nico, UCLA might be the only taker, right? So I know it seems right now like a distressed situation, but it could be a blessing in disguise for him to say, hey, when nobody else was there, these guys were. So I'm with you. The other part of this that could be interesting is Nico has now found out his top dollar market value, and he could go to other teams and say, hey, this is what UCLA has on the table. This is what we think we're worth. If you can match it, maybe there's a better situation out there for me.
I know it's basketball, but we did see UCLA pay a point guard, Donovan Dent, $3 million out of New Mexico, so they have spent in terms of their athletic endeavors. But once again, it sounds like there is an offer in from UCLA to Nico Iamaleava that is below what was anticipated, but nothing has been done yet. So let's talk about some contenders and some holes that they need to fill. We were trying to talk about Miami. Our friend Gabby Urrutia gave us a lot of great information about what they could add to help them get into the college football playoff, which of course is the ultimate goal. Brad, what's your take on what the Canes need?
Yeah, if I'm Mario Cristobal, I'm going all in, and I'm trying to surround Carson Beck, my top transfer signee this cycle, with as much weaponry as I can at the skill positions. I mean, Miami is a team right now on paper, Emily, that can go win the ACC, along with Clemson being one of the front runners. Maybe Florida State has a chance now with Mike Norvell sort of flexing his muscles in the portal once again. But, I mean, there's not a vast array of high-end wide receiver options right now. I think Syracuse wideout Trevor Pena is sort of the top guy right now, 9 touchdowns last season. We heard Fran Brown, Syracuse coach, say this week that, Pena was not very interested. He was worried a little bit in the quarterback situation there with Ricky Collins. Obviously, Miami has a pretty good quarterback situation, Carson Beck, 2-year starter from Georgia. But maybe also Miami knocks on the door of a Jonte Cook, the battle-tested kind of Texas wide receiver who signed with Washington, did not last there with the Huskies. He was able to, top 10 player. You're going to have to worry about some baggage with Jonte Cook, though. So I think Trevor Pena right now is probably Miami's top target. That's who I would go after if I'm Mario Cristobal, trying to get Carson Beck, another top-end wideout.
I'm with you, Brad. You look at Miami, you look at their situation, who they lost last year. I mean, look at Miami's wideout room. Isaiah Horton, gone. Xavier Restrepo, gone. Jacoby George, gone. Here are the list of receivers. They have to replace all that production. That is a lot of guys, right? And you think about who they bring in. C.J. Daniels, one of those guys. They like some young players. Malachi Toney, one of those guys. Josh Moore as well. They lost Nye Carr in the transfer portal this morning. Here's the thing. They got a lot of young pups that are really talented players, but you brought up the name that's really interesting, Trevor Pena out of Syracuse. And here's the thing. For Miami, that guy's burned in your head. He went for 123 and a touchdown, and Syracuse beat Miami late in the season. And the other thing about him, he had over 600 snaps in the slot. Xavier Restrepo was the safety blanket for Cam Ward every time they needed a big play in a big-time situation last year. So who's that guy going to be for Carson Beck? Because, quite honestly, we saw Carson Beck with mediocre skill talent around him last year, and that wasn't good enough. So you better surround this guy with some weapons. I think Trevor Pena to Miami is something ultimately that gets done, and even if they get him, we'll see what the market bears, but I wouldn't expect them to take their foot off the gas pedal and need for another receiver.
Pena is a 6-year guy, voted a team captain, nearly had 1,000 yards receiving last year. So somebody I'm sure Miami and a lot of other schools are very interested in. So they want to make it to the college football playoff. A team that was in the college football playoff is Georgia, but if you're a Dogs fan, you are eyeing a national championship. So hopefully some pieces to get them over the edge. I'll ask you who they might be interested in. But first, I want to hear from our friend Jordan Hill from Dogs 24/7.
The Georgia Bulldogs are typically not very busy during the spring transfer portal window, and I anticipate that'll be the case again in 2025. Now, looking at the roster, I would say outside linebacker is by far the position they'll be the most aggressive. It's a position that lost a lot of experience over the offseason. Chaz Chambliss out of eligibility, Damon Wilson transferring to Missouri. They're in a situation now where Quintavious Johnson, a true sophomore, is the most experienced player at outside linebacker. So I expect Georgia to be aggressive, try to add some experience there. Elsewhere, I would watch quarterback. I think that they are comfortable with Gunnar Stockton as that QB1, but they need experience behind him and redshirt freshman Ryan Puglisi. Georgia only has 2 true freshman scholarship players. So see if they can get an experienced veteran to maybe challenge Ryan Puglisi. The only other position I would watch would be running back, though the emergence of Bo Walker and Chauncey Bowens during spring practice may lead them to just stand pat there.
All right, Brad, you heard Jordan say that we don't usually see Georgia that active during this window. What do you anticipate from them?
Yeah, I don't think anybody feels sorry for Kirby Smart, though, right now, trying to find talent in the portal. He's won enough titles the last couple of years. But look, losing Damon Wilson to Missouri was a critically affected this linebacker room, so to speak, going into spring practice. I mean, you heard Jordan mention it there. Quintavious Johnson, he's the only guy. He sort of moved into that outside linebacker role. He's the only guy with sort of first-team reps this spring. There have been some injuries there. We mentioned that Wilson has left. And really, Georgia could use 1 or 2 more signees at that position. I got a text this morning. Y'all know I live here in North Carolina, a lot of ACC ties. UNC edge rusher Bo Atkinson, I think he's going to be a guy that Kirby Smart looks at in the portal. Already got some SEC offers. His name hasn't been in the portal for less than a day. So led the Tar Heels in sacks last season. I'm not sure how Bill Belichick let him go from Chapel Hill. So maybe Georgia takes a closer look there. And then one more position I'm looking at for Georgia is running back. Branson Robinson leaving. We know Nate Frazier is running back 1 there. But outside of Roderick Robertson, I mean, Branson Robinson was going to be the guy who got a lot of those shared carries this season with Nate Frazier. So I think Georgia is not really DEFCON 1 right now at running back, but certainly outside linebacker has to be a position that Georgia gets 1 or 2 more bodies at this spring cycle.
Brad, listen, we talked about it weeks ago. You and I both sat down and said, Kirby said what? I don't need a general manager. I can handle this all by myself. So now when you say that, you're putting yourself in a position of filling out your roster the proper way. As a coach, you're looking at it day to day, reps to reps. But as a general manager, you're looking at how is my roster looking, stacking it for depth to depth, competition for competition. Last time I checked, I've never once had a problem with Georgia just unearthing outside edge rushers. They look like they just peel them off and just throw them out at you, and everybody will get 6 sacks. But when you aren't projecting your roster, developing your roster in the right way, you get into situations like this. Running back, running the football at Georgia, I thought that's what they do for a living. So the fact that we're all sitting here saying that's what their needs are, I get it, I believe it, but maybe their number one need is going into the portal and finding a general manager to make sure that you don't go through this at Georgia, because Georgia is one of the top teams in the nation. You should be able to get whatever you need, and you should be pulling guys away off your team for saying, I don't want you anymore. But Bo Atkins, I'm with you. Great find, would fit perfectly into what Kirby wants to do. And it's not hard getting out of the Patriot way when you're at North Carolina to run out of there. Bo Atkins.
Yeah, exactly what Brad was saying with nobody's feeling all that bad for Kirby Smart for having trouble filling some of those holes, because they've been fantastic at both of those positions, outside linebacker and running back, for many, many years. Another team we want to hit on, LSU. They're number 2 in the transfer portal rankings so far, but what more do they need to do, Brad?
They need more bodies up front. I mean, they're losing 4 offensive linemen. You invested, Brian Kelly, that is, so much money into this offense this offseason. You went and got several wide receivers, one of the fastest players in the country in Barry Brown from UK, several guys there. You got Caden Durham coming back at running back. and you convince Garrett Nussmeier to not only stay at LSU, not portal and enter the 2025 NFL draft. So you're set on offense, but the big question is how that offensive line going to look.
Yeah, Brad, that's the biggest question. They got some really talented guys there. Weston Davis at right tackle. You think about Tyree Adams as well, two guys that we liked a lot coming out. Then you think about the interior of their offensive line. You got Braylon Moore, who they brought over, Josh Thompson, who we have a top 20 player, great on, coming over from Northwestern, and then DJ Chester bumps out to right guard potentially. So Brad Davis, I think one of the better offensive line coaches in the country. I think LSU's okay. I think the hard part for them is we'd love to add a veteran guy at offensive tackle. So would everybody else in the country, right? So that's the hard part. They might get priced out of there, and they might have to go in the fall and maybe roll with some young cats.
All right, Brad Crawford, thank you so much for all the great insight. Our friends watching us on YouTube right now, hit the like button to make Brad feel special, because we feel special having him on the show. Thank you so much. All right, so these are the 2025 transfer class rankings. You're looking at 1 through 10. We just talked about the number 2 team in LSU. We've been talking about what Ole Miss is kind of doing behind the scenes. 24 total commits for them, the number 3 class. You've got Oregon, Miami, Missouri, Florida State, a lot of programs doing some work in the overall transfer portal cycle. Moving on down into the top 20. You see a few more teams as well. I mean, some of these bulky classes, like at Mississippi State, 24 total players, 22 at Arkansas. Indiana, once again, Kurt Signetti going back in the portal and doing work with 20 total players. Let's bring in our friend Brandon Huffman out on the West Coast to give us some of your favorite classes. And it's pretty easy to start at the top with Texas Tech. There's a whole lot to like in here. What stands out to you, Brandon?
Yeah, I remember there was a time where Texas Tech had the highest rated class in the high school rankings about a year and a half ago. Well, now they're at the top of the portal rankings. And when you think Texas Tech, obviously you think offense with Mike Leach and you think Cliff Kingsbury. But yet it's on the defensive side of the ball where Joey McGuire has seen there's a need to rehabilitate that roster. So what do? They go after some of the best pass rushers that were available in this portal class. David Bailey was obviously a significant win. They beat Texas for him, UCLA, being that he was a Southern Californian. You got Romello Height, who is a top 30 edge rusher. You got Lee Hunter, Skylar Gill-Howard, and they've done a really good job of trying to kind of dispel this myth that Texas Tech only cares about offense. And in the Big 12, where it's been known to be an offensive conference, we saw it last year, they're shoring up that defense to be competitors for a Big 12 championship in 2025.
Yeah, to follow you, Huff, the other thing we talk about with Texas Tech, I think people love to talk about this hypothetical of like, okay, in college football, if we had a billionaire out there that said, you know what, I'm just going to pour all my resources into a program, what would it look like? The closest thing we have to that right now is Texas Tech. And here's the thing about it. They had the number 1 class. This is not just a quantity game. This is a quality game. 13 of the players that they have signed are in the top 200 of the 24/7 Sports transfer portal rankings. They have done a heck of a job. And you think about David Bailey. David Bailey's coming over from Stanford. He is not a Texas Tech type of guy. And I don't mean anything like that. Guys are moving around. That's transfer portal, all that type of stuff. But for Texas Tech to get that type of pass rusher, pair him with Romello Height, like Huff talked about a little bit, they have a lot of confidence in their quarterback and Baron Morton. This is a team that did some really, really impressive scouting. You got to give a lot of props to their general manager, James Blanchard. You think about their height, weight, speed philosophy on the high school side. This is a team with a lot of traits. And you look at the Big 12, who's it going to be, right? It was Arizona State last year, but I think a lot of question marks. Shedeur Sanders not there, nor Travis Hunter at Colorado. There's an opening there. And this is a team that's saying, you know what? We got a lot of cash. We're sitting on it. Let's be smart with it. And let's be aggressive. I can't wait. I really cannot wait to see what this looks like this next year in Lubbock.
Yeah, it's been a bit since we've seen that from Texas Tech, but it hasn't been a while since we've seen Oregon spend some money, not just in the transfer portal, but coming out of high school recruiting. But as it pertains to the portal, they're the number 4 class in this cycle. So what stands out to you about the acquisitions from this offseason?
Well, they got the best offensive lineman that was available in Isaiah World. They got down to San Diego, a place where they have had great success over the last few years, and they get an elite offensive tackle in Isaiah World. With Josh Connolly off to the NFL with an offensive line that was pretty veteran last year, they kind of focused on the offensive line with Isaiah World, with Emmanuel Prayon from USC, with Alex Harkey out of Texas State. And so while they don't have a quarterback coming in via the portal like they did last year with Dylan Gabriel, I guess granted Dante Moore came from the portal last year, they went and focused on protecting Dante Moore or Austin Novosad, whoever wins that job, and then to get some weapons there. They were hit hard by graduation at the receiver position, so they go get a Malik Benson. They get a Jamari Johnson from Louisville. And then the key one for me is actually on the defensive side of the ball. Is DeBara Alexander to Oregon move finally one that's going to be a problem that's solved? I mean, we've seen that there have been schools that find that maybe the third, fourth, fifth school is the charm. But again, you look at what Oregon has done defensively the last couple of years. Derek Carmen getting so much buzz right now in the portal. They have been a great destination for guys that are looking for 1-2 years of film to really flash. But where Oregon really did their damage this year is protecting whoever takes over at quarterback for a Heisman Trophy finalist in Dylan Gabriel.
Yeah, attacking the portal is the right way of doing it. And the right way, Coop, I both know it. I'm always going to tell you, your offensive line, defensive line. They did that. They know that their quarterback's young and you have to protect them. They went undefeated last year, but towards the end of the season, you just saw a team that was just getting worn down on the offensive line side and running the ball. They went out and got Mekhi Hughes, one of the most underrated pickups, in my opinion, just so you can just sneak in there. And at the end of the year, when you're playing Big Ten football, again, offensive line blocking, running back, running the ball downhill. So when you get to game 14, 15, and 16, you're at your freshest point. You don't want to be worn down again. Shout out to what Dan Lanning's doing, understanding what they went through last year of just seeing we were just a beaten team. We went undefeated, but we physically did not have enough depth up front to battle the big dogs at the end to capture the national championship.
Huff, another team you like in the top 10 is Missouri at number 6, and I'll call them maybe somewhat under-discussed for the most part because we keep talking about the guys that they've lost, but who have they added this cycle?
Yeah, speaking of under-discussed, people forget that a few years ago when Travis Hunter announced that he was going to Jackson State, a couple of weeks later, Kevin Coleman followed him, a Missouri native himself, went to Jackson State. When Deion Sanders left for Colorado, he did not go to Colorado with them, went to Louisville, went to Mississippi State, and now he's returning back home for his fourth school in 4 years at Missouri. So they kind of have some guys that have been under-discussed in the past. And then Damon Wilson, the number 3 overall player in the portal rankings, the number 1 defensive player heading there from Georgia, and then Nate Johnson from Appalachian State himself, another 4-star edge. And so with Eli Drinkwitz, they were expected to have a big 2024 season coming off that Cotton Bowl win in 2023. The season didn't quite go as planned in 2024, so they're kind of back all hands on deck, trying to upgrade the defensive line. They also got Ahmad Hardy from Louisiana Monroe coming in, who ran for over 1,300 yards last year, to go with Kevin Coleman. So a couple of parts maybe here and there just needed to fine-tune what Eli Drinkwitz has been able to build over the last couple of years, when maybe early on there was a lot of questions about the job he was doing. Now some stability, but then adding a couple of impact players to get them back to where they thought they were going to be after the 2023 campaign.
Huff did a phenomenal job breaking that down. We just talked a little bit of Missouri before he jumped on here, and Bo Prabula is that guy that, maybe we haven't spent a ton of time talking about, but he's a winner. He is one of those guys that I think is really going to marry up well with what Eli Drinkwitz wants to do there offensively. Huff also talked about Ahmad Hardy as well, north-south, big physical back that comes over from ULM. And then the guy that we really didn't touch on, Kevin Coleman. Huff brought him up coming over from Jackson State. Then he went to Louisville. Then he went to Mississippi State. This is school number 4. And typically when you're watching guys that are going to school number 4, you're like, all right, what's wrong with this guy? This was a guy that we ranked pretty high. We had in the top 50 of our transfer portal rankings. Dynamic, originally from the St. Louis area. He gets to come home. So I think it's marrying up well. And, the final thing here I want to say is, and just reiterate, Missouri has really found a niche of who they are. They have an identity as a program, knowing who they are on the high school side, and then really kind of coupling that all together, being aggressive, being, I would say, calculated spenders, smart spenders on the transfer portal market as well.
I love it. There are some contenders that are hoping to fill those holes to get in the college football playoff. Brandon Huffman, thank you so much for being here and breaking that all down for us. As Coop said, you did a great job. We appreciate it. You can check out more of his work at 247sports.com. You'll find all the transfer portal rankings, all the team rankings and things that we have been talking about on this show. You can find it on 247sports.com. And if you like what you see and you want a little bit more of that good, underrated info, we got 60% off annual subscriptions right now. Just use the code PORTAL. Man, you guys are going wild in the YouTube chat right now. We love it. I'm trying to keep up with all the comments as much as possible. This is a fun one that we've got here too. Yeah, hit that like button if you don't mind. We love to see your interest and your engagement. But I want to highlight this question from BRC Gamecock asking, who are the best defensive tackles in the portal? Why do you think somebody with the name Gamecock in their name is potentially asking about the available defensive tackles?
Sounds like they might need one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Demarion Thomas from Vanderbilt, you might know him. Guy that jumped in, big kind of nose tackle type of body that can play a couple different positions. He was a guy that entered yesterday. I think big functional athlete. That's what everybody's looking for. Those guys get compensated well. The big guys eat financially, whether it's the winter portal or the spring portal. Go down the list. I mean, there's a couple other guys. One guy, defensive lineman out of Ohio that jumped in last night. I apologize if I'm not all over the names, but that is also a slim market. And what's intriguing about this is it feels like teams are a little bit more protective over their guys on the defensive side of the ball on the line of scrimmage. There's been a lot of really good young depth, cheap depth that I think you can find from the group of 5 leagues of guys that specifically are experienced and play the tackle position, but if they were to move up a level, would slide inside and play guard. So I do think there's a little bit of that market exploitation of what you could look like. But in terms of defensive linemen that you're looking for, there's not a ton of warm bodies out there.
Coops, you're saying, so if you have a really, really deep defensive line, pay them so they don't hit the market.
That's exactly right.
Because once they do, everybody wants them. And then name you
Good
Cam
time.
Rice, the kid out of Ohio, like one of the hot names out there. And when you have a defensive lineman that can command the interior, not back blockers, have disruption, pressure, and run production, yeah, cool. He's the hottest thing on the market.
All right, some other guys I kind of want to talk about. We were talking about him earlier. I didn't really get to talk about this kid. Hummer made light of the fact that he's a darling of mine. Julian Neal from Fresno State by way of Stanford. Troy Taylor's out of there, so now he's on the market again. It's probably going to be Syracuse, UVA, Arkansas has got a crack at him as well. I mean, this kid is big, 6'2", 200 pounds, corners, and I could not figure out for the life of me. Smoke, you know this. It's kind of like, what am I missing here on some of these guys that kind of stick out? And this is a guy that only started 4 games, but he played in all 12. So I'm excited about this kid, what he offers. Really like him in press man, like him in bump and run. He's long, reactionary, and he's super physical. Right. Typically, you don't get that combination. So big fan of him. I think another name that jumped in here recently as well, Tamir Robinson, I think a guy that you're familiar with out of Penn State. Another long kind of off-ball backer that could have some situational pass rush ability. You look at another name out of Penn State, J.B. Nelson.
Love
right? The interior offensive lineman. Penn State has just done a tremendous job, especially on the interior. This is a guy that gets squeezed out, has the ability to go rebound and get picked up by a Power 4 team. Branson Robinson, okay, we need to talk about him. Really had a difficult time staying healthy, but it was a guy that we had ranked in the top 150 a couple years ago from Germantown, Mississippi. Built like a transformer, just in terms of his background.
That's how you want him to look.
Right. His biggest thing is durability, but if there was a team out there that was going to bet on the health, there's some flashes on tape. And, a couple other names that I'll give you, Kennedy Urlacher, son of Brian Urlacher at Notre Dame, hasn't gotten the run yet, but this is a starter type of player with high-level special teams ability, which college teams won't be looking at that, but just in terms of Sunday traits, that's something that sticks out as well. So, a ton of guys here. Ja'Kai Lang from Missouri, T.J. Bush from Liberty, 2 pass rushers I really like a lot. We talked a little bit about Chamar Brown, Xavier Lloyd I know you like. And then, the final guy, I just want to mention him again, Elo Madozi.
We love him.
So, love him.
YouTube chat was very excited to learn about him. So it's not just the top prospects. Yes, we're talking about what's happening with Nico, but also some of these under the radar guys that will be making an impact for one lucky team come this fall. We have a question here from a Kenneth Williams. Any chance whatsoever Faison Brandon reclassifies and comes to Tennessee a year early? Coop, he's already kind of on the younger side, correct?
He is, yeah, very young for his age, and one of the things that we like about him a lot. I would caution and say no, just because we've seen a lot of these freshmen play early, and it hasn't always worked out, right? We saw it with Dante Moore, we saw it with Jackson Arnold. I know Tennessee needs him, but Tennessee has to resist the short-term need for the long-term longevity and what's right for the player at the end of the day. So, and who knows? I mean, it's really hard to get a pulse on, like, what are the expectations for Tennessee this year as well? The last thing I'd want to do is take this situation, which is not a good one, and put him right in the
rush
middle
it.
of
Yeah, reclassification only means you get there when the other guys get there as well too.
He'd be behind.
He'll be behind regardless, and you have a young guy that's behind
And young, yeah.
that's trying to catch up, and you might ruin him by throwing him out there and not having success.
Yeah.
If he would have just sat down and just learned how to play that quarterback position.
And I'll say this too, like Andrew Ivins, our director of scouting, is doing a heck of a job on this, and this is something that he takes very personally. Yes. But these reclassifications, what we've seen so far, typically it's the quarterbacks that will reclass trying to get there early. We haven't seen the majority of the numbers work out for these guys in the way that we thought. Like, even if you look at a guy like Quinn Ewers was the number one player who reclassified. Best case scenario, second-round pick, third-round pick. I'm not saying he can't have a successful career. Austin Mack at Alabama is going through that right now. So that's wait and see. In the small sample size of evidence that we have right now, I would tell you stay in school.
The two positions that you want to see older guys at, offensive line, quarterback, because they have the most attention to details.
We need that microphone back to end the show
this
here.
mic has been
That's all
diabolical.
right. No, you have a lot of good information, so we need to make sure that thing is working properly. Yeah, sorry, Tennessee fans. Good things come to those who wait. Also, good things come to those who submit for our giveaway. We are giving away a yearly VIP subscription. So to enter, all you have to do is these three things. Take a photo of you watching us here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Share it, but share it while using the hashtag #RoadTo1Billion. It is time for us now to call our shots, and we'll start with the most impactful portal prospect this cycle. Call your shot, Smoke. Who is it?
You know what, Coop? When I saw the list, I went ahead and stole yours. All right? Oh, man,
Ouch.
Coop, listen. I wasn't trying to show up and do the right thing, so I did the wrong thing. I'm going to go with John Mateer.
Okay.
Just as you go into it, you understand that this guy's skill set is so rare in terms of being able to see it, process it, and play at his speed. But his speed is fast. But his fast is electric for everybody else. And I keep pointing to a 3,000-yard thrower, a 1,000-yard rusher. Like, that's just taking candy from a baby. That's nothing easy. I don't care what level that you're on. But his impact to Oklahoma is large, Coop. He's going to have to be that guy. Like you said, he might be the guy that can give you said 3 to 4, or you're going to go to 5 to 6 wins by himself. Yeah,
that's tough. I mean, I would say 2 to 3. The schedule is an absolute gauntlet there, their last 7 games of the season. But they've done a really good job in short order, kind of giving him the weapons that he needs. Giovanni Gibson, Keontae Lewis, Isaiah Sategna. You think about Jaden Ott as well, and they're very talented at running back. I think the thing that gives you the most confidence in John Mateer this season is the fact they brought Ben Arbuckle over from Washington State as well. It gives him that much-needed continuity that we talked about with Nico Iamaleava and why it was so important. John Mateer was not a difficult evaluation. He was difficult in the fact that in the production versus projection conversation, here's a guy that unquestionably will be the most impactful player in the transfer portal. How do you measure where he ends up in terms of the Sunday projection? A little bit different of a conversation. We're willing to table that for now. But this guy is lightning in a bottle, very dynamic, and I think he's exactly what Brent Venables in this program needed. I talked about somebody being responsible for bringing the swag and the confidence back offensively to Oklahoma football. That's going to be John Mateer. I think one of the best business decisions Brent Venables has made, the best one since he's been there.
All right.
No Nagy?
It's a good one
That
as well.
helps. Is it the best? There's been a lot of business decisions that have been made.
Give me the guy on the field. At the end of the day.
That's true. That's we're going to see the immediate impact there. All right, call your shot. Prospect with the most to prove. Coop?
Carson Beck. And think about it. If you were to go back a year ago, all the buzz about who was going to win the Heisman Trophy, who was going to be the number one pick in the draft, who was the betting favorite to win all these accolades, it was Carson Beck, right? So you think about what he has to prove at Miami, and this is a team that has a lot to prove, right? And you think about Carson Beck's offseason, hasn't exactly been quiet, right? There's been a lot of stuff going on there off the field as well, and hopefully he's got a couple more Lamborghinis that he can stockpile, and it'll be okay. But can Miami surround him with all the necessary weapons that this team didn't have last year on the defensive side of the ball? They've overcorrected defensively in the secondary. Can they do what they need to do in the spring portal to make sure that they have everything that they need on paper to make sure that this team is ready to go? Individually, I'm not sure that there's more of a player with something to prove than Carson Beck.
Coop, nasty work. You didn't have to throw the car in there. You didn't have to throw the off-the-field stuff that...
That's because I'm a hater. I'm jealous.
It would be nice to have my Lamborghini stolen.
Coop, I'm going to go with Zachariah Branch. Big-time recruit. Freshman year, he had some success in terms of just being a gadget guy, getting the ball in his hands, and he's lightning in a bottle. But now we want to find out, can you play receiver? Can you line up, run a route, get open, catch the ball in traffic, score, and be the number one option for Georgia? They paid you a ton of money. We know that. Like, it's a business move. You're not going there for pennies. You're going there for a lot of dollars. Carson Beck, you just said, left that place. Now this guy's emerged at Georgia, and is he the number one option for Georgia? You're going to have to show us that you can play the receiver position, lining up, running routes, getting the ball, instead of just being a gadget guy and a punt returner specialist.
All right, call your shot. Who is the most exciting prospect of this cycle?
I'm going to go with Nick Anderson. And here's the reason why. Because I stole him from LSU just for you, because I know that once you start talking about LSU, you start getting fired up. So I'm going to get a little bit fired up for you, because when you have a quarterback like Garrett Nussmeier and you have this type of talent, size, speed, the ability to run with the ball in his hands, catch, get open, and score touchdowns with explosive speed, yeah, I'm excited to see this baby get rolled out down in Baton Rouge on Saturday nights. Just hopefully he's not doing it against the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, they're about 15 deep at receiver there at LSU, and I exaggerate, but they got a lot of weapons. I think that's really the only question mark outside of the health with Nick Anderson. He's got first-round pick potential and exciting. I mean, what's funny about this, and this portal is kind of illuminating. You're sitting there and you're kind of like, all right, well, who's the most dynamic? Who's the most exciting guy? I came away with another Miami guy, Xavier Lucas, the corner from Wisconsin, and there are probably a lot of Wisconsin fans rolling their eyes right now because I understand that situation was a tough one, obviously, with all the litigation taking place there. But Xavier Lucas, you just talk about the athlete, the size that he has at the boundary corner position, what he's been able to provide this spring for Miami, a guy that can play both sides of the field. And this is a guy with the opportunity to start full-time in Coral Gables. There's just not a lot of guys like this, right? We talked about Julian Neal and what the appeal was to a player like that. Imagine that at a much higher level with Xavier Lucas, and he's young, and he's got multi-year eligibility. So this is a guy that can be a defensive cornerstone for Miami. I'm the most excited about him, and I'm also a little nervous, right, because we haven't seen that much of him either. So I'm excited to really kind of see the extended reps this season.
All right, final call your shot. Know this name. Who is it, Coop?
I'm going to go with Will Helt, and this isn't sexy. Clemson doesn't do a lot in the portal, but they did this year, and they went and got Will Helt, and this is a guy that had 5.5 sacks from Purdue. And the reason that this really fires me up is because you think about Clemson, arguably the most talented roster in college football coming back, and that's a kudos to Dabo Swinney. You have Tamarian Parker, a guy that's probably going to be a first-round pick next year. You have Peter Woods, one of the most established interior in defensive linemen and defensive ends in the country. Now you go to the portal, you find a guy that fits you culturally, right? That's what we talked about. That's also a dynamic player off the edge. And what's funny is, thinking about that LSU game week 1, what did we talk about for LSU? We talked about the tackles, right? And if there's one guy you can game plan him, right? You can chip, you can do some different things, maybe to find a way to compensate. You got 3 guys that can beat you off the edge and pass rush downs. That makes it really difficult. So for Clemson to get back to one of the most vaunted defensive fronts in the country. And the only way they could do that is go find a guy like Will Helt. I think Will Helt is going to be not an answer, but he is going to be just a huge addition to a team that was already good. They're going to be great in terms of what they can provide pass rush-wise.
Man, welcome to the portal, Coach Sweeney. You went in and got somebody that's worth the money. Like every single penny that you spent on him, you're going to get just because of the way that he works. But Coop, I'm going to go with a sexy guy. You don't have to go sexy. I'm going to go sexy. Sincere Brown, out of Campbell, wide receiver, 6'5", 190. When I cut the film on, Coop, you know what I was looking for? I was looking for a long, leggy receiver that struggled to come out of his break. Absolutely not. I saw a guy that you put the ball in his hands. His run after catchability, supreme. Run after yards contact, supreme. You 6'5" guys aren't supposed to be able to put their foot in the ground, change direction like this, get back outside, make guys miss, and score. You're just thinking about throw the ball up, let me go get it. But dynamic, soft hands, strong hands, run after the catchability, explosive plays out in Boulder, Colorado. It's like they got another one. Shout out to those guys at the personnel department for going through, doing their due diligence to find a lower level guy to level up to give them explosive playmaking ability.
Colorado gets this flash reputation. I wonder why. They do a good job scouting, and I wouldn't say unearthing guys, but they do some things that aren't traditionally sexy that are really, really good football moves. So I'm excited. I think it's a really good growth opportunity from them from a front office standpoint. See what this roster looks like year 3 without Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders.
I love it. That was Call Your Shot. We appreciate you engaging on YouTube right now, engaging in our poll that we have had running. Should college football only have one portal window? 79% of you say yes. 21% say no. Guys, does that mean they don't like our show? Or
No.
what's going on?
It's not it.
What do you think? Where would you vote, Coop?
I would vote with the majority here, selfishly. But I think it's more just it's hard. It's hard for people to kind of keep up. It's a lot of moving parts. A lot of guys. I mean, even the double transfers, guys are like, I was reading like Mark Hamper at Wisconsin who came over from Idaho. He's in the portal already. What happens with Tanner Koziel comes over from Ball State? He's not with the team. What happens with the linebacker from
AJ Pena?
AJ Pena that goes from Rhode Island to Memphis. He's back in the portal. It's just a lot to keep up with, and I think ultimately at the end of the day, there's a lot of fans out there. I don't want to speak for them, but they're probably saying, "Who's on my roster? Like, what are we going to have when we line up week 1, and what's it going to look like?" Right. So a lot of player movement late in the offseason. So I think one portal window would go a long way.
I think one portal window would be the answer to correct a lot of the bad and all the wrongs, and I would have it in the spring, for the simple fact that you won't have the playoffs being interrupted by players saying that they want to get in, and I don't know where I'm going to show up, and your coach not knowing what his depth looks like. But you also give each person in the personnel department, your general managers, an opportunity to comb through your roster, to have the early enrollees on campus and know exactly what you have. And also on the academic side, give players the opportunity to graduate and then move on. So the spring window would be my ideal window for it, and I agree 100% it should be just 1 instead of 2.
Smoke made a really critical point. I mean, if you were to go back in the beginning in December and think about all the things that college football had going on, I mean, it's a million things. So imagine if you're a playoff team trying to win a national championship, still trying to balance your roster. We heard the reports out there what Tennessee went through this last year about, who's going to be able to suit up as guys are trying to get pay raises. I think putting it in the spring gives you time to evaluate the roster, and then it also gives you time to disassociate from the emotional wear and tear of the season. And I talk about like cooler heads, but it almost gives you a pre-negotiation period until it officially opens up in the spring. I think that's important for both sides.
But it also gives you enough time to vet those players as well, too, because we all know coaches are getting on the road next week. And when you're on the road, you can go see those guys. Sit down, talk to them, and find out who they are and who are you bringing into your building. Spring window, I'm telling you, Coop, makes perfect sense. You're the new commissioner.
No thanks.
Day 1 of the spring transfer portal window has come and gone. I'm sure there will still be plenty more moves to be made over the next 10 days and probably over the next 10 hours as well. So I shouldn't call the day done quite yet. But as we bring you our final thoughts on this day, the biggest news, of course, is what will happen with former Tennessee quarterback Nico Iamaleava. We have 2 reports out of Fox from Colin Cowherd and Bruce Feldman, both reporting that Nico has landed with UCLA. However, our guys here with Chris Hummer and Matt Zenitz have not been able to confirm that report. But we do know that Bruin Report Online, who is part of the 24/7 Sports team site network, saying that there is an NIL offer out to Nico Iamaleava, but it is well below the reported asking price, and so nothing is quite done there yet. As I try to encapsulate everything that we have learned today, Smoke, what are your overall thoughts on this Nico situation?
I think Nico is going to find his home. And we can all say he's not going to end up in UCLA, but whenever there's smoke, there's fire. He's going to end up there. Just at the end of the day, they're trying to work out the business portion of it. How much money is he going to get? And that's it. There's nothing else that's been said about where he's going. And like we said, the market's somewhat dried up on him.
UCLA, like I said, I'll go back. I think UCLA needs Nico. They need an identity. They're happy to take on this kind of what I think a lot of other teams would categorize as a flight risk right now. And obviously it's a messy situation, but they're willing to take it on. And I think if you're Nico, you owe it to UCLA, to Sean Foster, Tino Sinceri. You better be all in. You better freaking dial it in, dude, over the next 2 years, because your NFL future is on the line, and your job is to make everybody forget about what happened in the last week. And you can do that with your play. You're that type of talent, right? So he's going into with all the options on the table. This is a pretty manageable landing spot for him to get his career back on track, right? And the other part about this is a program that all of Nico's ability is going to have to be on full display to elevate a roster around him that wasn't a top 10 rushing offense or didn't have a top 10 defense. So it's all about how you make the players around you better. We're going to find out whether or not he can do that here pretty soon.
And something else that Bruin Report Online was able to add, right now there aren't many other viable offers on the table for him, but UCLA has offered Nico Iamaleava an NIL contract to potentially be the next quarterback for the Bruins, or at least compete for the job. As we wrap up this day, let's talk about some stock up, stock down teams. Coop, hit me with a stock up team.
I got to give credit to Oklahoma. It's kind of weird in terms of you can shake your head all you want, but
he's still in I'm writing him down. He's still in it.
But
I've had a good day.
Goes both ways. All right. So OU is one of those teams that we talked about. Like, I think a lot of people are they okay? Do they get to 7-8 wins? Is Brent Venables going to be a guy that's going to be there past this season? We've talked about the Nagy hire. We've talked about what this is going to look like. I think the Jaden Ott acquisition is important because it tells us that Oklahoma is serious about where they want to go. And this is a room that didn't necessarily have to make this move in terms of their running back room. They were in a pretty good spot. But this is one where they're saying, you know what, we're not taking any chances. We don't know how long we have John Mateer, and we're going to make sure that we give him the weapons that he needs. So I like Oklahoma, and I think, we'll see what they do at tackle and what they do with that offensive line. How you get the numbers back on your side is having to defend guys like Mateer and guys like Jaden Ott. So hat tip to them.
Yeah, cool. Listen, I'm that kid that should sit over your right shoulder and take all your answers. So I'm going to take this one from you as well, too. And I'm just going to go on the side of having those offensive pieces allow Coach Venables to now stay solely on the defensive side. And he does exactly what he needs to do, and that's a good defensive coordinator. But adding the running back to it, Jaden Ott, giving John Mateer just a viable option that if I don't have to do everything with my legs, and making sure that running back room is stocked properly so you can go through that SEC season and just divvy up and have a tandem role for that battery ram of a season that you're about to face, slow the game down, allow your quarterback to make the right decisions, and you'll get to, like you said, Coop, playoffs? Is that what you said?
No.
I'm messing with you.
Quarterback John Mateer added in the December transfer portal window. Running back Jaden Ott added from Cal. He was a grad transfer, so he actually committed yesterday. So it's been a good transfer portal cycle for Oklahoma. But with the good, there's the bad. I'll let you start with this one.
Good.
Stock down.
So he can't steal my answers. Looking at you, Coop. Tennessee. Yeah, you can't lose your starting quarterback the last day of spring ball and not have any answers moving forward. And even as we're going on today, nothing is showing us that they've been active in the portal and trying to get their starter. So for me, you lose one of the better players on your team, maybe the best player on your offense, stock all the way down to the bottom because you have to start all over again.
Tennessee was one of the teams that I was considering there, and I think, just in terms of, losing your franchise quarterback, that's really, really tough. And I think we would both agree, and this goes both ways, avoidable from both parties, right? But the team that I think really took the biggest hit here in the winter portal, and it's just continued, about Cal, and we've talked on this show about Ron Rivera and, the power struggle at Cal and what that represents. It seems to me that, at least financially and what we've seen with these players jumping in the portal, that there is some disconnect, right? And I'd love to get to the bottom of that, kind of see what's going on there. But financially, if Ron Rivera is still not the one calling the shots, and that's where the boosters said the money's going to be, and we're still not in this rev share college football world yet, then that's a pretty fascinating situation to monitor. And it sucks because Justin Wilcox, year after year, they have their hands tied in terms of what they can do, and they're still competitive. And this year is just another year where they're not able to keep up.
Cal lost 5 running backs, just running backs in this portal cycle.
And a good tight end, too.
Good tight end, yeah, in addition to
and they're starting quarterback.
A lot of other players. I'm just saying 5 running backs total is tough to swallow. There's some position battles, some teams that we're keeping an eye on over these next 10 days who the loser of those position battles, or just however those play out, could have a potential effect on the portal. Who should we be keeping an eye on, Coop?
I think Notre Dame, the quarterback battle there. I'm super fascinated just to see, like, is it C.J. Carr? Is it Kenny Minchie? Is it Stephen Jelly? We've heard a lot of things there. And then the other one would be Ohio State in the quarterback battle, and how long does that drag out? And what does that look like? Like, Lincoln Kineholz has a very white-knuckle fight to the death type of feel to him. And I wonder if Julian Sain is like, you know what? Like, we heard the comments Ryan Day said about talking about his size and from the pocket and some of the difficulties that come as a play caller, having to navigate that. So those are two, especially Sain, just given his pedigree and his background and how highly recruited he was coming out of high school. Those are two really kind of intriguing quarterback situations that I'm watching.
Yeah, Coop, I'm going to go with my alma mater. I don't want to say Alabama. They got 3 on campus right now, 2 more than, Tennessee. And it's always good to have a battle like we have right now, just because you have Ty Simpson that's been there for 4 years, and he's right now the number 1 guy. You have a 5-star talent like Keelan Russell, but Austin Mack is sitting there saying, where do I fit in? Might be sitting in the portal. But it's always good to have that type of competition, and they still have a chance to go through fall ball for someone to find out who's going to be the number 1 guy. Because as of right now, if they rolled it out, Coach Ryan Grubb said Ty Simpson would be the starter. But you and I both know you can't keep 5-star talent on the bench very long. And me being on campus last Tuesday, Coop, he looks different in Keelan Russell. It's going to be hard for Ty to keep him off of the football field. They might just have to tie him in a few packages to keep him around.
You can apologize to me and Tennessee fans all you want, but I'll use this as a reminder that the SEC to SEC transfer in the spring makes it very difficult to see the field because you have to sit out a year if you make that transition.
Nobody does that anymore.
Vols fans need to look elsewhere for their quarterback. But he is Cooper Patagna. He is Smoke Dixon. I am Emily Proud. Thank you so much for joining us on this transfer portal Palooza. We will continue to keep you updated on everything that is happening throughout this transfer portal cycle. It is not over yet. We got 10 more days with the portal being opened. And then, of course, we got to figure out where all these guys are headed. And so you should tune in every Monday and Wednesday to the Ultimate College Football Show. You can watch it right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Thanks again so much for watching. We'll see you back here Monday.